Chapter 1186. Urbi Rue was an undead. To be more precise, he was a vampire among the undead. The number of people who knew about this was very few. However, as Urbi Rue's companions, it was impossible for Haggis and the others not to know the true origin of Urbi Rue. In order to prevent anyone from noticing him, Urbi Rue even used a black robe to cover himself tightly, and even wore a mask. However, Noah's interest in Urbi Rue was clear to everyone present. This man who came to sell weapons saw through Urbi Rue's origin. Understanding this, led by Haggis, Urbi Rue, Glenn, Tina, and Tia all silently raised their vigilance. This was especially true for Urbi Rue. On his mask, his eyes seemed to flash with a red light, making everyone present feel a trace of blood in that instant. What was an undead? From a conceptual point of view, those individuals who were born from the dead and possessed immortal life were called immortals. There were many types of undead. For example, zombies and skeletons were the most common type of undead. Similarly, vampires were also a type of undead. And because the undead were basically individuals born from the dead, under normal circumstances, the undead were the kind of existence that hated life. For the undying, things like taking away life were already an instinctive nature. However, there were exceptions to everything. Among some intellectual undead, there were also some who could suppress their hatred for life and establish interpersonal relationships with the living. For example, Satya, the true ancestor of vampires, never showed this kind of instinctive hatred for Noah. Of course, Noah was the supreme ruler of the underground tomb in Nasarek, but it also meant that Satya could control her hatred for life very well. Otherwise, Satya wouldn't have offered the highest level of loyalty to Noah. Urbi Rue was obviously such an undead. Noah was interested in Urbi Rue for two reasons. First, it was because he could feel that this Lolita vampire was not as simple as she seemed. Being able to integrate into human society so well proved that Urbi Rue was definitely not the kind of low-level undead that would be devoured by instinct and not have high intelligence. At least, in Noah's view, this lowly vampire was definitely much higher than the so-called fine steel adventurers in terms of level. Preliminary judgment, it was estimated that she was around level 50. So, even if Gujiefu stepped into the hero realm, if Urbi Rue was serious, she could kill him in one move. Seeing that the group of fine steel adventurers showed a vigilant attitude towards him, Noah smiled bitterly. Okay, everyone, you don't need to be so vigilant against me. I'm just interested because I have a companion like Ms. Urbi Rue. The same? Led by Haggis, the group of fine steel adventurers were stunned. Same. Urbi Rue was also stunned on the spot. Even if her expression could not be seen, it was still obvious how shocked she was. Only Annabelle frowned and couldn't help but speak. I think that Lady Satya is much nobler than her. Wasn't that right? In terms of race, Satya was the true ancestor of vampires. In terms of status, Zaisha was the strongest one among the guardians of the underground tomb in Nasarek. And in terms of level, Satya was the maximum level of 100. Compared to Satya, Urbi Rue was undoubtedly more than one level lower. However, Urbi Rue, who didn't know this, was a little annoyed. Is that so? Urbi Rue said so. Then, if there is a chance, you must let me see the Satya you are talking about. Yes. Noah smiled perfunctorily. There will be a chance. Everyone present saw that Noah was perfunctory. However, everyone's vigilance was slightly relaxed. Judging from Noah and Annabelle's performance, there should be no mistake that there was a vampire as their companion. Since that was the case, as people who also had vampire companions, the group of elite steel-level adventurers were against Noah and looked at him in a new light. After all, the undead were destined to stand on the opposite side of humans because of their hatred for life. People who could understand each other without racial views could still win the favor of some open and above-board people. However, he had a follower, an undead as a companion, and could casually take out two extremely precious magic weapons. What was the origin of this man in front of them? It had to be said that the group of fine steel adventurers led by Haggis were really curious. At this moment, on the street outside, a commotion suddenly sounded and reached the ears of all the adventurers in the hotel. Noah's heart skipped a beat. Because, from the commotion, Noah heard a lot of footsteps that sounded like steel hitting the ground. It was the sound of iron boots hitting the ground. Moreover, the number of footsteps was quite large. In the hotel, the group of adventurers also heard these sounds clearly and immediately began to talk about it. Listening to these footsteps, it should be soldiers or guards, right? With such a large number of soldiers or guards dispatched, did something happen again? Who knows? Maybe it's those nobles who like to play tricks and take out their private soldiers to show off. That's right. The group of adventurers had such a conversation while their faces were more or less filled with disgust. It seemed that in the kingdom, the nobles were really disliked. Especially in the capital where the nobles were mostly, it was even more so. As a member of the nobles, Haggis could only smile bitterly at this situation, but there was nothing she could do. After all, there were quite a lot of corrupt nobles in the kingdom. Even Haggis had to admit this point, right? Of course, admitting it did not mean that Haggis would sit back and do nothing. At this moment, Haggis stood up directly and looked around at the members of the Wild Rose. Let's go out and have a look. Except for Haggis, the other 4 members of the Wild Rose nodded without any objection and stood up. Mr. Noah. Haggis looked at Noah and said, "Do you want to go with us to have a look?" "All right." Noah pondered for a moment, then nodded. "I have someone I want to find. If I follow you, it may be easier to find him." After that, Noah took Annabelle and walked out of the hotel with the adventurers of the Wild Rose. However, just as they walked out of the hotel and entered the street, the commotion suddenly expanded. On the street, because of the commotion just now, all the residents disappeared. They should have seen that the situation was not good and directly fled. On such a vast street, a group of guards with long swords and spears were surrounding a group of people who looked like outlaws. No. It should be said that there was a fight going on. Those outlaws were all more or less equipped with some weapons in their hands, and they fought fiercely with the surrounding guards. In the fight, the guards who surrounded the group of outlaws seemed to be a little timid. They did not look like well-trained warriors at all. Instead, they looked like strong ordinary people who were forced to do something beyond their abilities. In fact, this was indeed the correct perception. Unlike the soldiers who protected the king's city, the guards who patrolled the king's city were promoted from the civilians and did not have sufficient training. They were just a group of ordinary people who knew how to use weapons. Now, facing a group of fierce outlaws, these guards were naturally afraid. Many of them could not even hold their weapons steadily. Under such circumstances, the group of outlaws rushed out. "Get out of my way." A guy who looked like the leader directly kicked away a guard who screamed a little exaggeratedly, and rushed directly in the direction of Noah and his companions with his companions. Not knowing if it was because they were in a frenzy, this group of outlaws did not even find the metal cards of a group of fine steel adventurers. They rushed up with a ferocious face. "Those who block the way, die." Roaring such a sentence, the guy who looked like the leader was the first to rush out of the crowd. The blood-stained sword in his hands suddenly slashed out, cutting the air, and mercilessly falling on the head of the person in front of him. That person was Noah. Chapter 1187. Swish. Just like that, the sword that carried the smell of blood slashed down towards Noah's head. From the looks of it, he had no intention of showing any mercy. Seeing this scene, many of the guards even cried out in surprise. It was as if they could already see the scene of Noah's head being cleaved into 2 by this sword. However, as the person in question, Noah merely looked at the sword that was slashing down at his head, and there was not the slightest change in his expression at all. It wasn't just Noah. Even the fine steel adventurers of Wild Rose didn't react to this situation. They just looked at the outlaw who was slashing at Noah with a calm expression. Obviously, no one thought that Noah would be injured in such a situation. Including Annabelle. However, that was just that. Even though she knew that these ants couldn't even harm a single hair on Noah's body, Annabelle still couldn't stand by and watch these lowly human beings attack the supreme ruler of Nazareth's underground tomb. Lightning strike. When this cold voice echoed in the surroundings, a dazzling bolt of lightning suddenly streaked across the space behind Noah, landing on the outlaw who was about to slash his sword at Noah's head. Bang! Along with the sound of an explosion, dazzling thunderbolts directly exploded on the outlaw's body, turning into chaotic electric snakes that covered the outlaw's entire body. Beep, beep, beep. Ah! The sound of electric currents colliding and the mournful screams resounded through the entire space at the same time, instantly attracting the attention of everyone present. Not long after, the outlaw whose body was covered in lightning snakes became charred black. His body emitted a burnt smell and his eyes rolled back. He maintained his posture of raising his sword to chop Noah's head as he slowly fell to the ground. The outlaws who rushed out with him all stopped in their tracks and looked behind Noah in horror. Over there, Annabelle raised a finger to the front. There were still flashes of lightning on the finger, telling everyone present who had launched the lightning strike just now. M.O. Magic Chanter. And he's a third-ranked magic caster. Damn it. All the outlaws fell into a state of panic. The spell named Lightning Strike was indeed a third-ranked spell. Being able to use third-order magic proved that Annabelle was at least a platinum-level adventurer. An expert of this level was definitely not in existence that those outlaws who only knew how to wield their swords could match. Thus, those outlaws all panicked. The cowering guards were overjoyed. Only the fine steel adventurers from the Blue Rose mercenary group still had the same expression. As the highest-level elite steel-tier adventurers, only a spellcaster who could cast 5th-tier spells could match them. And because of their previous impression, the group of fine steel adventurers from Blue Rose did not think that Annabelle was just a spellcaster who could cast third-ranked spells. So, this level was not enough to surprise Hagrid and the others. Lord Noah. Annabelle slowly retracted her finger flashing with lightning and said expressionlessly, "Shouldn't we let these stinking ants who dared to attack you go to hell to repent?" Hearing Annabelle's emotionless voice, a chill ran down the backs of everyone present. At this moment, no one had any reason to believe it. As long as Noah nodded gently, then none of those outlaws would be able to survive. Wait! In the crowd of outlaws, a person shouted, "We surrender." After saying that person directly threw down the weapon in his hand and raised his hand with a frightened look. All of a sudden, it was as if a chain reaction had been set off, causing the outlaws to cry out one by one. "Surrender. We surrender. Don't kill us." Without any hesitation, those outlaws threw down the weapons in their hands one after another, raised their hands, and did not even dare to move. Seeing this, Noah scratched his cheek and looked at Hagrid. Hagrid immediately understood, took a step forward, looked at the guards, and said loudly, "Why aren't you suppressing them?" Only then did the surrounding guards react, hurriedly stepped forward, and subdued the outlaws who abandoned their weapons and surrendered one by one. It was not known if every world was like this, but those who were really responsible for law enforcement always appeared after the matter was resolved. When the guards at the scene had suppressed all of the outlaws, a group of soldiers wearing neat equipment under the lead of a person rushed over amidst a flurry of loud and chaotic footsteps. Moreover, the person in the lead was someone Noah knew. "Oh." Gigrin grinned. "Isn't that Uncle Gudjifu?" "Yes." The person who came was the kingdom's warrior captain, known as the kingdom's strongest warrior, Gudjifu. "Even the warrior captains have been mobilized?" Hagrid looked at the outlaws thoughtfully. "It seems that these guys are not ordinary thieves." Noah also heard Hagrid's words. However, Noah had no interest in what kind of people those outlaws were. At this time, Noah's gaze was already cast on Gudjifu who led the troops, and his eyes lit up slightly. Just as he was about to look for this warrior captain appeared. It really came at the right time. On the other side, Gudjifu also noticed the group of fine steel adventurers of the Blue Rose, and also noticed Noah who was looking at him. At that moment, Gudjifu was stunned at first, then his face lit up with joy. He raised a hand, and ordered the surrounding warriors who were under him. All of you, go and help. Under Good Jefu's lead, the warriors who came here all responded, and then spread out to help the guards and suppress those outlaws. Then, Good Jefu put one hand on the sword at his waist, and walked in front of Noah with his head held high. Sir Dole. The first thing Good Jefu did was to greet Noah, and one could see that his face was full of joy. I am very happy that you could come. Good Jefu's words stunned Hagrid and the others, and then they were surprised. What? Hagrid couldn't wait to ask. Do you know Mr. Noah, warrior captain? Yes. Good Jefu was obviously acquainted with Agagi, so he nodded happily. Not long ago, the king sent me to the border to carry out a mission, and I met Sir Noah Dole there. Sir is quite a powerful man, and I also invited Sir to come to the capital, but at that time, I was rejected by Sir. Powerful man? Gigrin asked directly. How powerful? Good Jefu pondered for a moment, and then said so. At least, he should be stronger than me. The group of fine steel adventurers all felt suffocated. Stronger than Good Jefu? In other words, at least a powerful man who had stepped into the realm of heroes? Sir Dole has come to the capital, please allow me to receive you. Good Jefu said happily. I believe that His Majesty will be very willing to receive you. Hearing this, Noah shook his head and looked at Good Jefu. I came to the capital because I have something to ask of you, warrior captain, and not to see the king. Something to ask of me? Good Jefu was slightly startled. Even the fine steel adventurers of Wild Rose looked at each other and laughed bitterly. It turned out that Noah didn't come to the royal city just to sell 2 daggers. But, that was also true. To have a magician who could at least cast 3rd-tier magic as a follower, and to be said by the strongest warrior of the kingdom to be inferior to him. How could such an existence simply come to the royal city to do a simple business deal? Of course, Noah really only came to the royal city to do business. But, it was not a small business, but a large one. Although Good Jefu didn't know what Noah's purpose was, he still felt a little disappointed knowing that he didn't come to seek refuge with the kingdom. Of course, disappointment was disappointment, but Good Jefu wouldn't neglect Noah because of this. Anyway, let's talk somewhere else first. Noah naturally didn't have any objections, and directly nodded. Chapter 1188. While Noah was in action in the royal city, the underground tomb of Nasarick was operating as usual. In a meeting room, Yair Bedard, who was the head of the Guardians, sighed faintly with a listless attitude that she usually didn't have at work. Hearing Yair Bedard's sigh, all the people present stopped their discussion, and more or less showed annoyance on their faces. It was obvious that Yair Bedard had been in this state for a long time. Yair Bedard, are you still not awake? Demiurgos pushed the glasses on his face and sighed as well. As the head of the Guardians, we will not approve of such an attitude when all the Guardians are having a meeting. Taking a closer look, all the Guardians in the underground tomb of Nasarick were gathered except for the Guardians on the 4th and 8th floors. This was a Guardian meeting that would be held almost every once in a while since the management and operation of the underground tomb of Nasarick began. The purpose was naturally to gather the opinions and results of the Guardians on the various floors on the management and operation of the underground tomb of Nasarick before making better arrangements. Usually, the Guardians would gather together for a meeting every once in a while like today. After the results of the discussion were out, Yair Bedard would be responsible for bringing the results to Noah and report to Noah. Then, he would bring back the instructions from Noah. Now, Noah was not in the underground tomb of Nasarick. As the head of the Guardians, Yair Bedard was in charge of all kinds of matters in Nasarick. He would replace Noah in managing the underground tomb of Nasarick. Under such circumstances, it was no wonder that the Guardians would have objections to this agent being so listless. It was not only because Yair Bedard, as the head of the Guardians, should not have such an attitude. It was also because as Noah's agent, this person who got the job that all the Guardians dreamed of working with such an attitude was simply disrespectful to Noah. If they did not know the reason for Yair Bedard's listless performance, the Guardians would have already made things difficult for him. Of course, even if they didn't make things difficult for him, there would still be dissatisfaction. As the representative of the Honorable Supreme, you really shouldn't have such an attitude, Cosette said in a low voice. Shouldn't you feel honored to be able to work for the Honorable Supreme? That's right, Yawad said in a bored tone. If I had known this would happen, would have let Demiyugos do it. Big sister, you're being too rude. Malay weakly tugged at Al's clothes and then looked at Yair Beda, revealing a delicate smile that a boy shouldn't have. Please keep your spirits up. Serves you right. Xia Taya held a nail clipper and curled her lips as she trimmed her nails. Who told her to seduce Lord Noah? Isn't it a given that you'll be rejected? That was right. The reason why Yair Bade was so depressed was because the seduction plan had failed a while ago. With Xia Taya poking at his sore spot, Yair Bade's beautiful face twisted to a degree that an ordinary lady would never have. Yair Beda immediately looked at Xia Taya with a cold smile. At the very least, I still have a chance to seduce Lord Noah. Compared to a vampire who can only stay in the first, second, and third floors all day long and can't even see Lord Noah's face. I can only hide in my room and deal with vampires by myself. This time, it was Xia Taya's turn to be poked at her sore spot. The corners of her mouth twitched and her face twisted. No matter how one looked at the two of them, they were the highest level of beauty. Their beautiful faces were twisted to a degree that would frighten an ordinary man, causing the timid Malay to shrink his head. Don't be too happy. Xia Taya's face twitched as she looked at Yair Beda. The smile on her face was as ugly as it could be. I just didn't have the chance. Once I had the chance, I would have succeeded in one fell swoop. I definitely wouldn't be like you and scare Lord Noah away. Who did you say scared Lord Noah away? Yair Beda was agitated. Lord Noah just felt that at this important moment when the underground tomb of Nassarik is officially in operation, he can't focus on personal relationships. He's so kind that he couldn't bear to reject me, so he chose to run away. Even if Lord Noah is kind, it can't hide your failure. Xia Taya puffed up her voluptuous breasts that didn't match her age and said proudly. After this period of time passes, the kind Lord Noah will finally be able to get away from his busy work. I won't have to look after the first, second, and third floors all the time. Then, I can be intimate with Lord Noah. As she said this, Xia Taya's beautiful face turned red and her expression became extremely flirtatious. That look was enough to make any man go crazy and lose his mind. However, the words that came out of the mouth of such a seductive girl made people speechless. I wonder if Lord Noah will love me as fiercely as he did in the throne room. Xia Taya looked as if she was enduring something and felt very uncomfortable. If Lord Noah can whip me as fiercely as he did back then, how great would that be? Seeing Shadia reveal the standard masochist's dazed expression after being ravaged, Yal, Mer, Cossets, and Demiyugos were all speechless. TSK, Yair Beda was speechless. Damn masochist. Huh. Xia Taya's expression stiffened, and she returned to her original state as she glared at Yair Beda. Filthy slut. Who are you calling a filthy slut? Yair Beda glared at Xia Taya. I keep my body clean every day for Lord Noah, and I'm ready to give my first time at any time. Am I not? Xia Taya glared at Yair Beda as well. I take care of my skin every day for Lord Noah, and I'm looking forward to seeing Lord Noah leave whip marks on it. Suddenly, the two extremely beautiful girls started an argument that seemed to have no bottom line. If Noah was here and heard the conversation between Yair Beda and Xia Taya, he might really be scared away and not dare to come back. Yair Beda, Mer, Cossets, and Demiyugos could only look at each other and sigh helplessly. Just as everyone felt that they should stop it, the door suddenly opened. Sebastian, who was wearing a butler's uniform, walked in from outside. As soon as he came in, he spoke to everyone present. Guardians, Khan Village has welcomed an uninvited guest. That one sentence silenced everyone present. They're finally here? Demiyugos suddenly smiled. As expected, Lord Noah guessed correctly. In order to not let the resurrection cause unnecessary trouble, Noah had asked Yair Beda and Mer to modify part of the memories of the residents of Khan village so that the resurrection would disappear. However, apart from the matter of the resurrection, there was another matter that couldn't be hidden. That was the disappearance of the sunshine scripture. Sebastian. Yair Beda's expression also became serious as he asked. Is it the people of the Syrian theocracy? I'm not sure, but it shouldn't be wrong. Sebastian answered truthfully. Right now, they are investigating a place not far from Khan village. That is where Lord Noah and Lord Yair Beda took care of the sunshine scripture people. Thank you for your hard work, Sebastian. Yair Beda nodded and looked at all the guardians present. Then, since the people of the Syrian theocracy have appeared as Lord Noah predicted, then we should follow Lord Noah's instructions and take them all down. Let's see if we can use them as a means to negotiate with the theocracy. Is it finally time for me to appear? Xiataya revealed a seductive smile and stood up. Let me carry out Lord Noah's instructions. The guardians nodded in agreement. If Xiataya, who was the strongest in one-on-one combat among the guardians, were to take action, it would be guaranteed that nothing would go wrong. Unfortunately, the heavens did not listen to their wishes. Chapter 1189. Noah, who was far away in the capital, naturally did not know about what happened in the underground tomb of Nasarek. It was not that Yair Bed and the rest did not report to Noah using message. Instead, Noah had already instructed that as long as the people from the Syrian cult kingdom came to investigate, they were to be taken down and used as a means to negotiate with the Syrian cult kingdom. And the content of the negotiation was naturally about the magic sealing crystal. According to the information obtained from the sunlight scripture, Noah knew that in this world, only the people from the Syrian cult kingdom could use the magic sealing crystal. That was the most precious treasure of the Syrian cult kingdom, and only the higher-ups of the Syrian cult kingdom could have it. Other than the Syrian cult kingdom, no one else had the magic sealing crystal. And it was said that the magic sealing crystal seemed to be a treasure left behind by the 6 great gods who had descended into this world a few hundred years ago and became the religion of the Syrian cult kingdom. How could the 6 great gods have the magical equipment in Yggdrasil? This was what Noah wanted to know. For this matter, Noah had to prepare a means to negotiate with the Syrian cult kingdom. In the process of interrogating the information, the sunlight scripture, one of the special intelligence forces of the Syrian cult kingdom, had already been wiped out. It was not worth it to use the resurrection tool for these people. So, after Noah concluded that the disappearance of the sunlight scripture would definitely attract the attention of the Syrian cult kingdom who had been monitoring the sunlight scripture with the intelligence magic and would most likely send people over, he simply let Sebastian hide in Khan village and wait for the arrival of the people from the Syrian cult kingdom. And once the other party sent people over, by then, he would take them down and use them as a means to negotiate with the Syrian cult kingdom. Now that everything had been arranged, there was naturally no need to report all the time. So, Noah still stayed in the capital and carried out his money-making plan. In this aspect, Noah had also thought it through. As mentioned earlier, in this world, according to the different abilities of the adventurers, they would wear metals of different hardness and preciousness. The rarity of these metals, from low to high, were copper, iron, silver, gold, platinum, mithril, orichalcum, and stainless steel, a total of 8 kinds. In other words, in this world, on the surface, steel was the hardest and most precious metal. Some of the very high-level armaments were basically refined using stainless steel. For example, the equipment of the fine steel adventurers of the Blue Rose Guild was mostly made of fine steel. In Noah's treasure vault, there was also a metal like steel. The reason why there were these metals was because stainless steel was a type of metal that had a very good circulation of mana. In many magic and magic rituals, steel was often used as a catalyst and medium, as well as a base for the construction of magic arrays. It played the role of guiding magic power. Back then, when Gaia and Alea were preparing the Gate of Babylon, they had stuffed everything that could help Noah into it. Because of this, Noah's Gate of Babylon naturally had this type of metal. In addition, these metals were used as catalysts and mediums for large-scale rituals. Noah's Gate of Babylon also treated these metals as consumables. In other words, these metals could also be replenished automatically. With this condition, Noah had an unlimited supply of stainless steel, which was used by countless people in this world as a source of high-level equipment. Thus, selling large amounts of stainless steel was undoubtedly a very profitable thing. Unfortunately, due to the preciousness of stainless steel, not everyone could consume large amounts of it. Therefore, Noah needed the kingdom's warrior captain Gudjefu to act as a middleman and provide him with a channel to sell large amounts of stainless steel. Gudjefu did not disappoint Noah. In the name of the warrior captain, this guy introduced Noah to many capable merchants. With the kingdom's warrior captain as a guarantor, these merchants naturally did not worry about Noah playing any tricks. Thus, Noah established a business relationship with these merchants. Of course, considering that the appearance of large amounts of stainless steel would cause problems in the market, Noah did not sell too much. Even so, with the extremely precious stainless steel as a trade item, Noah still made a huge profit. If this world's money could really be used to maintain the underground tomb in Nasarek, then this channel would become a very important source of funds for Nasarek. If not, then this world's money could be used to purchase other materials that could be used to create equipment, items, and other items. This channel was also very important. Thus, Noah did his best to establish a friendly relationship with these merchants to ensure that this channel would not have any problems. When all this was done, Noah did not even have time to rent a hotel. He could only stay in the kingdom's warrior captain's mansion under Gudjefu's hospitality. As for the group of Grey Rose's adventurers, naturally they would not all stay in Gudjefu's house, but they seemed to be curious about Noah. Come to think of it, there should be a lot of dealings with these adventurers in the future, right? The next day, Noah cleared away the accumulated fatigue from yesterday and slowly woke up from his sleep. Outside the window, the dazzling sunlight spilled into the room and hit Noah's face. When Noah opened his eyes, he was slightly dazzled. He squinted slightly, then propped up his upper body and yawned. As soon as he woke up, Annabelle's voice was transmitted to Noah's ears. "Good morning, Lord Noah." Hearing Annabelle's voice, Noah seemed to remember something. He turned his head and looked aside. He saw that in the corner of the room, Annabelle, who was wearing the same robe as yesterday, saluted respectfully to Noah. She also prepared the water to wash his face and brought it to Noah. "Let me serve Lord Noah to wash up." Yesterday, Annabelle firmly disagreed with letting Noah sleep alone in this unfamiliar place. She tried her best to stay by Noah's side to protect him. If it were an ordinary human, considering that the other party also needed to rest, Noah would never agree to this kind of thing. However, Annabelle was an alien creature and did not need to sleep, so Noah let her be. In addition, in the past, Noah was also known as Medusa's servant to guard him all night in the world of the tight moon, so he did not have much discomfort with this matter. Soon, Noah finished washing up under the service of Annabelle, and walked out of the room with Annabelle. As soon as he walked out of the room, Noah heard a conversation. It was from the direction of the hall. With Annabelle, Noah walked in the direction of the hall. After a while, a rather vast hall appeared in front of Noah and Annabelle. In the hall, several people were gathered together to talk. One of them was naturally the owner of this mansion, Gudjefu. In addition to Gudjefu, a group of Grey Rose's elite-level adventurers, led by Haggis, were also all present. However, Noah noticed them. Among these people, there was also a young man. A young man with short blonde hair and a healthy complexion. The young man seemed to have noticed Noah as well. He stared at Noah as if he had seen something he had yearned for even in his dreams. That gaze, to put it nicely, was persistence, to put it bluntly, it was rude. Annabelle's brows were already frowning. Fortunately, after this period of activity in the human world, Annabelle was no longer like before. She didn't want to fight for Noah at the slightest provocation and was very good at restraining herself. As for Noah, he did not care about such a gaze and walked straight forward. "Your Excellency Dole." Gudjefu heard the movement, looked at Noah, and smiled slightly. Did you rest well last night? Very well. Noah returned a smile and said so. Thank you for your hospitality, Your Excellency warrior. No, no, no. Good Jefu shook his head. I'm very honored to be able to entertain someone like you. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to entertain you. Haggis smiled sweetly. Mr. Noah, please sit down and talk. Chapter 1190. In fact, Noah's initial idea was to leave directly after greeting them. After all, led by Hagrid, one of the only two fine steel teams in the kingdom gathered together to discuss with Good Jefu, who was the kingdom's warrior captain. They must be discussing something important, right? Although Noah had met Good Jefu once and received a lot of favors from Good Jefu yesterday, it didn't mean that Noah would be tactless and disturb others when they were discussing business. After all, Noah was also an outsider, wasn't he? However, after being greeted by Hagrid, Noah was embarrassed to leave directly in front of Good Jefu, who had helped him a lot. He had to sit down at Good Jefu's suggestion. Of course, Annabelle, who claimed to be Noah's follower, still stood behind Noah and didn't sit down. She became the only one present besides the young man who didn't sit down. So, Good Jefu said to Annabelle. Your Excellency Annabelle, sit down too. No need. Annabelle didn't even look at Good Jefu and refused directly. I'm Sir Noah's follower. There's no reason to sit with the master. Is that so? Good Jefu didn't want to force it and nodded. Understood. Please forgive me for my improper consideration. Annabelle is just too serious. Noah smiled as if to smooth things over. Sometimes, even if it's my words, she won't listen. Noah's words made Annabelle, who was indifferent in front of Good Jefu and others, panic and speak quickly. No, no such thing. As long as it's Sir Noah's order, no matter what it is, I will do it. Hearing that, Noah was speechless. Of course, Noah knew about this. The sentence just now was just to smooth things over for Annabelle. However, this inflexible maid didn't seem to see anything, which made Noah a little embarrassed. So, Noah stood up and faced Annabelle. He reached out and lifted Annabelle's chin with a slightly frivolous smile on his face. Are you really going to do it no matter what? Annabelle stiffened from head to toe. Looking at Noah's frivolous smile, Annabelle's beautiful face turned red. Not to mention Annabelle, even the people present were somewhat embarrassed by Noah's sudden action. It was especially so for that young man. Even when facing the strongest warrior of the kingdom, Annabelle didn't show any expression, but when she saw Noah blushing coquettishly in front of him, her heart started to beat faster. When she realized that this wasn't good, she quickly straightened her face. There was no other way. The young man was also loyal to a person who was unbelievably beautiful. In the past, the youth did not believe that there was anyone in this world who could compete with his master in terms of appearance. Now, Annabelle's appearance made the young man realize that the world was still very big. Of course, as far as the youth was concerned, no matter how beautiful Annabelle was, she couldn't be compared with his master. However, looking at a girl who could compete with his master in terms of beauty blushing, the youth couldn't help but feel his heart beating faster. In this way, it made the others feel as if they had disturbed Noah, which made them even more embarrassed than Noah. Noah felt that it was about time. He laughed in his heart and couldn't help but pat Annabelle's pretty face. As a girl, especially a beautiful girl, you can't say to a man, I will listen to you no matter what. Otherwise, not every man can think of Pian Pian. After speaking, Noah released the blushing Annabelle's chin, turned around again, and sat down contentedly. It's really enviable that Mr. Noah can have such a beautiful follower. Hagrid smiled bitterly. To be honest, apart from Lana, I really haven't seen anyone more beautiful than Miss Annabelle. The people present nodded one after another, making the youth at the side look like he wanted to say something but stopped. Oh. Gegland grinned. This virgin seems to be unconvinced. Virgin? The corner of Noah's mouth twitched, and he cast a strange look at the youth. I'm not a virgin. The youth finally couldn't help but speak up. I have a name. My name is Clem. You actually refuted? Geglan said with some surprise. Usually, when I call you that, don't you look indifferent? That's because Clem doesn't care what others think of him. Gudjefu said helplessly. However, in front of the people Clem cares about, it's better to give him some face. Gudjefu's words made Noah's heart move slightly, and he looked at Clem. Clem's expression changed, and he also looked at Noah. Let me introduce. Mahagi spoke up at the right time. Mr. Noah should have heard of the Golden Princess, right? Mahagi's words awakened a part of Noah's memory of the information he had collected during this period of time. Of course, Noah had heard of that name before. Because, in the whole kingdom, the fame of this name, to a certain extent, was even above the kingdom's warrior captain Gudjefu and the leader of the fine steel adventurers team, Mahagi. Lana Ter Chardin Lao Van Seve. With a head of blonde hair as a symbol, she was known for her beauty and wisdom both domestically and abroad, and was praised as the Golden Princess. It was said that this princess had proposed many cross-era policies, although most of them were obstructed by the nobles who cared about their own interests, causing many of them to be rejected. Even so, it still had a great impact on the kingdom. For example, the abolition of the slavery system and the establishment of the Adventurers Guild were facilitated by this princess. Even the kingdom's governance would privately refer to this princess' proposals. Therefore, it was impossible for Noah not to have heard of this princess's name. As if she saw something from Noah's expression, Mahagi smiled slightly and pointed at Clem. This is Princess Lana's follower, responsible for the princess's safety. Greetings, Mr. Noah. Clem bowed to Noah, but his eyes were fixed on Noah. I heard from the warrior captain that you are stronger than him, so it is an honor to be able to meet you. That's only because the warrior captain thinks too highly of me. Noah shook his head. Don't take it seriously. Alright, kid, don't be so polite. Geglan seemed to be unable to stand Noah and Clem's politeness and waved his hand. This virgin isn't here to talk to you politely. He has something to ask of you, if I'm not wrong. Clem was speechless. Geglan's guess was completely correct. Ask me for a favor? Noah asked curiously. Is there anything I can help you with? Yes. Yes. Clem seemed to have become nervous, and after a while, he said so. Can you teach me a little bit about fighting? Noah raised an eyebrow slightly. As expected. Gudjefu sighed. I knew it, if you have a favor to ask of someone, then it must be this matter. With Mahagi as the leader, other than Annabelle, everyone else nodded. Needless to say, Clem had done the same thing many times. Because of this, Ibilui, who had been silent all this time, spoke. You still haven't given up? Clem was silent all of a sudden. This was needless to say. Ibilui had said the same thing to Clem many times. Then I'll say it again. Ibilui said with a tone that left no room for doubt. Kid, you don't have talent in this area, whether it's martial arts or magic, it's not suitable for you. So, it's best if you work hard in other areas, don't blindly hope for others to guide you and increase your strength. Clem did not say anything, but lowered his head and remained silent. Seeing this, Noah narrowed his eyes. It seemed like it was just as Ibilui said. This young man named Clem, whether it was martial arts or magic, he did not have talent. But from Clem's eyes, Noah could not see the word give up. Ibilui naturally saw through Clem's thoughts. Talent is something you can't ask for. Ibilui said. No matter how hard you work, if you don't have talent, it's useless. Chapter 1191. Once upon a time, there was a saying that went like this. The so-called success referred to 99% hard work and 1% talent. From this saying, there was no doubt that hard work was the most important thing for a person to do something. Thus, there was the saying that the clumsy bird flies first. However, if the smart bird flew with all its might from the start, could the clumsy bird catch up? The answer was naturally no. Thus, some people said, although 99% hard work was important, that 1% talent was more important than 99% hard work. If the so-called success was 100%, then even if talent was a small part of it, without it, even if 99% of hard work was put in, lacking that 1%, one would never be able to achieve success. It was all right to apply this phrase to Clem. Clem himself was the clearest. Although he was the princess's follower, Clem's strength wasn't that outstanding. At most, he was slightly stronger than ordinary warriors and soldiers. In terms of adventurers' levels, Clem was roughly equivalent to a gold adventurer. In terms of Yggdrasil's level, Clem was around level 10. Not to mention Gudjefu, who was the strongest warrior in the kingdom, and not to mention the fine steel-tier adventurers like Higagi and her party, even if they were compared to many other adventurers, they would still be much weaker. Originally, with Clem's strength, it was impossible for him to become the follower of such a famous princess. The reason why Clem could become the princess's attendant was that when he was young, he was picked up by the princess when he was on the brink of death. That was how he became the princess's attendant. Therefore, the reason why Clem could become the princess's attendant was not because of his outstanding strength, nor was it because of his amazing talent, but because of his fortuitous encounters when he was young. Furthermore, Clem didn't have any talent in martial arts or magic. Putting aside the fact that he hadn't learned any magic, just the ability of a warrior was enough. No matter how much Clem practiced with the sword, even to the point where his hands were bleeding and blisters were breaking out, he still wasn't able to reach the level he had hoped for. A gold adventurer. For those with extraordinary talent, it was a low wall that could be easily crossed. But to Clem, it was an achievement that he had worked so hard to achieve. Then, recently, Clem felt it. The speed of his improvement was getting slower and slower, to the point where it was infinitely close to zero. If this continued, Clem would not be able to make any more progress. He would only be able to achieve this in his lifetime. It was because of this that Clem couldn't wait to ask for guidance after knowing that Noah was an existence more powerful than Gudjefu. Perhaps, Noah had a way to solve his predicament. At least, Clem didn't want to admit defeat, let alone give up. Thus, Clem could only remain silent in the face of Ibylua's words. But Ibyluai could easily see the emotions behind Clem's silence and said mercilessly, "Some say that talent is a bud before it blossoms. Everyone has it. The only reason why people think they don't have talent is because their talent hasn't bloomed yet. But if you ask me, that's just wishful thinking." Now, one of the most common stories people hear is about a person without talent who relied on his own hard work to become a hero. Because of that, ordinary people can have dreams and hope. Ibyluai snorted. But I want to say that it's not because they don't have talent. It's because they haven't worked hard enough. The talent hidden deep within their bodies hasn't been awakened yet. That's different from you. Ibyluai spoke with confidence. Because you've worked hard, but that's all you've got. Clem's lips parted slightly, but in the end, he couldn't say anything. It wasn't just Clem. Even Hagrid and Gudjefu were silent. They didn't say anything. Talent isn't something everyone has. Some have it and some don't. Ibyluai glanced at Clem. So, I won't ask you to give up, but you better not force yourself too much. Otherwise, the bigger the hope, the more despair you'll feel when it's gone. Understand? Suddenly, the crowd fell into a deathly silence. Under normal circumstances, when it came to this, someone would speak up for Clem no matter what. But whether it was Hagrid or Gudjefu, no one chose to speak up for Clem. Noah could see that it wasn't because everyone here didn't care about Clem. On the contrary, everyone here was familiar with Clem, so they didn't choose to speak up. Most likely, everyone here had seen Clem's desperate efforts, but he hadn't been able to get the results he wanted, right? Thus, when they saw Clem forcing himself like a moth to a flame in the pursuit of power, they couldn't bear to see him like this. Instead of letting him continue like this, they felt that it was better to speak up. That way, it wouldn't be so hard for Clem. Ibyluai also had the same feeling, which was why she said such unpleasant words. In other words, everyone here was just worried that Clem wouldn't be able to hold on one day. In fact, Noah more or less agreed with Ibiliui's words. As mentioned before, 99% of effort was very important, but that 1% of talent was also indispensable. Of the two, no matter which one was missing, it would be impossible to achieve the final success. But, although I agree that it's very hard to not have talent, there's one thing I don't agree with. Just like that, Noah suddenly said such a sentence when everyone was silent. Perhaps, talent isn't something everyone can have, but it's also impossible for a useless person to exist. This sentence was like a ray of sunshine, instantly dispelling the gloomy atmosphere. Everyone immediately cast their gazes at Noah, their expressions somewhat stunned. Clem's eyes lit up as he stared at Noah. Under everyone's gaze, Noah shrugged and said, "Perhaps, little brother Clem doesn't have talent in martial arts and magic, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have talent in other areas. If he can spend this effort in these areas, then wouldn't it be like what Miss Ibiliui said, that talent can blossom and bear fruit?" Saying such a sentence, Noah looked at Clem. Why do you want to become stronger?" "Why do I want to become stronger?" This question made Clem clench his fist. Once, Clem was a child that no one wanted. He didn't even see his parents' faces, wandering the kingdom as an orphan. In such a world, this was not a rare thing. But that day, Clem met light. She was called the Gold by the people, and had the beauty that no one in the kingdom could match. This princess didn't care about the beggar-like, dirty Clem at all, and extended her hand to him. From that moment onwards, Clem's fate changed. Then, was there a second reason why Clem wanted to become stronger? "I want to have power." Clem spat out a strong and powerful voice. "The power to protect Lady Lana from any enemy." Hearing this, Noah smiled and stood up. "Then let me see how strong this power is." Clem was stunned. In Gudjefu's mansion, there was a rather spacious courtyard. At this moment, in this courtyard, with Gudjefu and Haggis as the leaders, Ibiliui, Gragland, Hina, and Tia were all gathered together. Annabelle was alone at the other end. However, everyone's gaze was on the center of the courtyard. There, Noah and Clem were facing each other. Noah's expression was calm. Clem, on the other hand, was a bit serious, and there was a faint trace of nervousness. Noah raised his eyes and looked at Clem, who was across from him. "Don't worry about it. Just attack as much as you like." Chapter 1192. Noah's words startled Clem. After hesitating for a moment, he asked tentatively, "Are you not going to use any weapons?" Indeed. Even though Clem wasn't equipped with any equipment, he still had a long sword at his waist. One of his hands was gripping the sword tightly, obviously intending to use a sword. However, not only was Noah dressed in casual clothes, he didn't even carry a single weapon. Moreover, it seemed that Noah didn't intend to use any weapons when facing Clem. Of course, Clem didn't think that Noah was looking down on him. The reason why he asked this question was to get some information. Because if he wasn't going to use any weapons, it was very likely that he was going to use magic. Clem wanted to use this as an excuse to get information about Noah's upcoming battle tactics. If Noah intended to use a weapon, it meant that he was going to use the methods of a warrior to fight. If Noah insisted on not using any weapons, then Clem had to be wary of Noah using magic. This was Clem's plan. However, in the next moment, Noah's actions stunned everyone present. A weapon? A thought-provoking smile appeared on Noah's face. He raised his hand and extended a finger. "Then I'll use this finger to fight you." Finger. Finger? Clem was completely stunned. Hagrid, Gudjefu, Ibiliui, Gorgland, Tina, and the others were also stunned. "What is the meaning of this?" Gorgland frowned. "Is that guy looking down on us?" The others exchanged glances with each other before turning to look at Noah with a slightly serious expression. They wanted to see how Noah intended to fight with a single finger. On the other hand, looking at Clem's dazed expression, Noah revealed a mischievous smile. "What? Not going to attack?" Don't tell me you're afraid of my finger? Noah's words made Clem react. He stared at Noah's finger, trying to see something from it. Unfortunately, no matter how he looked, Clem could only see a very ordinary finger. With no other choice, Clem could only warn himself that he had to be more vigilant. The other party was an expert that even the strongest warrior in the kingdom admitted to being inferior to. Then, no matter what kind of method the other party planned to use, compared to Clem, he would only be stronger, not weaker. If he let his guard down because of this, it would be over. Thus, Clem took a deep breath and slowly pulled out the long sword at his waist. He pointed it at Noah and lowered his waist as he spoke in a low voice. Then, I'm going. The moment he finished speaking, Clem was like a spring that had been pushed to its limit. His entire body suddenly shot out and swept towards Noah. His speed was naturally faster than anyone present. However, the distance between Noah and Clem wasn't that far to begin with. Thus, in just a blink of an eye, Clem flashed in front of Noah and raised the long sword in his hand above his head. With a tearing sound, he heavily chopped down at Noah's shoulder. Although he didn't think that he could win against Noah, but Noah wasn't equipped with a single piece of equipment, and he didn't have a single weapon in his hand, so Clem subconsciously showed mercy. However, in the next second, Clem realized there was no meaning in showing mercy at all. Clang dash. Following a clear sound of metal clashing, Clem's long sword that was aimed at Noah's shoulder was directly blocked. It was blocked by a finger. Wah! Clem was shocked. Even Haggis, Gudjefu, Ibilui, and the others had looks of surprise on their faces. Then, Noah's voice sounded with some helplessness. So, didn't I say? Noah looked at Clem's shocked face and smiled. You don't have to worry. Just attack as you please. After saying that, Noah slightly bent his finger, which was blocking the sharp long sword, and fiercely flicked the tip of the long sword. Clang dash. With a bell-like impact, Clem was unable to resist the slightest bit of force with his ability. The force was reflected back from the long sword in his hand. Clem was sent flying along with his sword. After rolling on the ground a few times, he finally stabilized his body. The whole place suddenly went silent. Noah. Lord Noah. Clem looked at Noah in shock. Are you a warrior monk? Warrior monk. That was a profession. In Yggdrasil, there were more than 2,000 basic professions, including basic professions and advanced professions. However, the maximum level of each profession could only be raised to level 15. Therefore, if one wanted to reach level 100, one character would have to train at least 7 professions. Of course, one could also inefficiently train each profession to level 1. After training 100 professions, one would reach the maximum level of 100. Because of this, in Yggdrasil, as long as it wasn't done on purpose, there wouldn't be identical characters. After all, out of the 2,000 professions, it was impossible for one to pick 7 or more professions to be exactly the same. This world had a lot in common with the game Yggdrasil. One of them was professions. Just like Yggdrasil, the people in this world had all kinds of professions. For example, Gudjefu was a warrior. Clem was also a warrior. The fine steel adventurers led by Haggis also had their own areas of expertise. As for the magic chanters that people often talked about, it was actually just a general term for those who could use magic. Among the magic chanters, there were also many professions. For example, clerics, priests, forest priests, occultists, enchanters, magicians, bards, witches, talisman masters, immortals, and so on. They were all collectively known as magic chanters. It was said that among the many professions, there was a profession called warrior monk. It was a profession that could use a special power called chi, and use one's own body as a weapon. The existence of this profession generally didn't use any weapons. Instead, they used chi to strengthen their own body and train it to the limit. Once trained to the limit, the warrior monk's fist could even directly smash the hardest steel. The hardness of the body could also reach the level of steel. Noah blocked the sharp long sword with a finger. If this wasn't the power of a magic tool, then it could only be the ability of a warrior monk. Thus, when Clem said this, Haggis and the others understood. Only Gudjefu, like Clem, looked at Noah with a face of uncertainty. Although Gudjefu wasn't sure if Noah was a warrior monk, he knew that Noah could use magic. The knight who attacked Khan village was turned into steel by Noah's unknown magic. In addition to his intuition, Gudjefu always felt that Noah was a magic chanter with a power stronger than himself. Now, Noah broke Gudjefu's belief. Could it be that in addition to being a magic chanter stronger than himself, Noah was also a warrior monk who trained his body to be able to block sharp weapons? Gudjefu's heart tightened, and the way he looked at Noah also changed. Of course, Noah wasn't a warrior monk. There were only 3 reasons why he could block a sharp longsword with a finger. 1. Noah had reached LV4, and reached the SSS stage of durability, so his resistance to attacks was quite high. 2. Noah had a permanent magic called Sword's Protection, which could weaken physical attacks. 3. Noah had Swordsman, which could increase the attack power of his own sword-type weapon, and weaken the attack power of the enemy's sword-type weapon. If Clem used a high-level weapon, it would be a different story. However, an ordinary longsword was no longer able to hurt Noah at this moment. Although that was what he said, Noah wouldn't say it out loud. Noah just pointed his finger at Clem. What's wrong? Aren't you going to continue attacking? Hearing this, Clem tightened his grip on the sword, and his eyes sharpened. He finally put aside his unnecessary worries and charged forward with all his strength. Swoosh! In the whistling sound of the wind, the sharp longsword once again slashed at Noah. Chapter 1193. Hiya! With an imposing shout, the sharp longsword in Clem's hand turned into streaks of sword light. Like a cutting machine, it slashed towards Noah's body. Looking at the continuous slashes, Noah stretched out his finger with an expressionless face. He only moved when the sword lights that resembled a cutting machine shot toward him. On the side, everyone could only see that just like Clem's slash, Noah's hands suddenly turned into a blur as it danced continuously. Clang, 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 clang. Immediately, the numerous merciless slashes that were rushing toward Noah were blocked by his extremely ordinary finger amidst clear clashing sounds. Clang. When the last slash landed on Noah's finger, and the sharp longsword was blocked by Noah's finger, everyone present saw it. Noah blocked one slash after another. His fingers, which were as hard as steel, suddenly moved. Like an arrow leaving the bowstring, he swept towards Clem's forehead and flicked his finger. Bang! Undoubtedly, it was just a flick of the forehead, but it caused a muffled sound. With a muffled sound, Clem was abruptly sent flying by that extremely ordinary finger. Like a kite with a broken string, he slammed into a wall amidst the sharp sound of breaking air. Cough. Clem only felt that all the air in his chest had been spat out at this moment. His head felt as if it had been hit by a stick, and even his vision became blurry. Logically speaking, if one's head was struck by a force that could send a robust youth flying, it wouldn't be strange for one's head to explode. However, Clem didn't feel any intense pain on his forehead. He only felt a sharp pain on his back when he hit the wall. Clem knew what this meant. It meant that not only did Noah have the terrifying ability to block sharp longswords without suffering any injuries, he could also control this ability to perfection. When Clem felt dizzy and his vision became blurry, Noah's voice sounded again. If that Princess Lana was here right now, I would only need a single second to kill her while you're still lying there. Clem's heart trembled. A strong emotion burst forth from Clem's heart, causing Clem's willpower to soar several times. His incomparably dizzy mind was forcibly stirred up, and he gradually regained consciousness. His vision began to recover. The person who pointed a finger at him was also imprinted in Clem's eyes. Clem tightly clenched his teeth and forced his body to support himself. With one hand on the wall, he stood up shakily. The entire process was extremely difficult, but in the end, Clem successfully stood up. Seeing Clem like this, Noah narrowed his eyes and suddenly smiled. So that's how it is. Your kind intentions are truly rare. After saying this, Noah's expression changed. His expression became emotionless. It's just that, in the face of death, will this kind of heart be able to remain intact? Following this sentence, in the next instant, an astonishing aura burst forth from Noah's body. That aura was like a tangible pressure, enveloping the entire space. Everyone present felt their shoulders become heavy, and their bodies involuntarily lowered slightly. Hagrid, Gudjifu, Ibilua, Gegland, Hina, T, and the others were completely speechless. Because, even if they were steel-grade existences that stood at the peak of humanity, they still felt a burst of shock. Even these players who were at least level 29 were in such a state, let alone Clem, who was only level 10. Clem felt as if his heart was being squeezed tightly by a hand. On the opposite side, Noah's figure suddenly expanded to an indescribable height in Clem's eyes, making Clem feel as if his breathing had stopped. It couldn't be helped. Without using authority, even if he didn't use the power of Demon Slayer, or Gate of Babylon, Noah was still comparable to a level 100 existence. The aura released by a level 100 existence made even Ibilua, who was estimated by Noah to be around level 50, stiffen, not to mention Clem who was around level 10. However, Noah didn't care about Clem's reaction at all and slowly opened his mouth. Until now, you were the one who launched the attack. Now, it's time for me to attack. Saying this, Noah's voice pierced Clem's heart. So, if you don't want to die, then resist with all your might. At this moment, Noah's voice was already far away in Clem's ears, as if it had become incomparably distant, but Clem heard it clearly. Thus, Clem knew. 1 second. In the next second, if he couldn't react, then he would die. Rationally, Clem told himself that Noah wouldn't suddenly kill him and kill him. However, when he felt Noah's aura coming towards him like a storm, Clem couldn't help but think this way. Perhaps, he really would die. Death. His brain couldn't function anymore. His body couldn't move. At this moment, there were two kinds of emotions in Clem's heart. 1. Fear. 2. Anger. The fear was the fear of Noah. Anger is anger at oneself. Clem could tell anyone without hesitation that he wasn't afraid of death. If he could die for his master, then it didn't matter when he died. However, the master he needed to protect wasn't by his side, nor was he facing any danger. Instead, he was waiting for his guards in the palace. Under such circumstances, how can I die without doing anything? Clem roared. In his heart, his anger towards himself overcame his fear. At this moment, Clem seemed to hear a pop sound in his brain, as if something was opened. Immediately, a torrent rushed back and forth in Clem's body. That torrent was called power. Then, Clem felt it. His hands could move. His feet could move. His senses seemed to have reached their limits, and he could even feel the vibrations in the air. As everyone knew, in order to prevent the body from overloading, the human brain would limit the power of the muscles to a certain extent. However, when one reached the limit, the brain's limit on the muscles would be temporarily lifted, allowing the body to display an unimaginable explosive power. At this moment, the human brain would secrete a large amount of hormones, and their thinking ability would be focused on survival. The brain would be able to process all kinds of huge amounts of information at high speed, searching for the best way to act. Now, Clem was in such a situation. Thus, in that instant, Clem's physical body, perception, and physical abilities were raised to a whole new level. His strength, which was originally only at the level of a gold adventurer, was promoted to platinum adventurer in one go. Hiya! With an explosive shout, Clem gripped his sword so tightly that his veins popped out. He bent down and suddenly shot towards Noah like a bullet fired from a gun. In the next moment, a sword that flashed with cold light cut through the air. With a sharp sword hum, it slashed towards Noah's direction. Clang! A crisp sound that was louder than any of the previous collisions resounded throughout the courtyard. However, it was not the sound of fingers clashing with swords. Instead, it was the sound of the overly powerful slash that caused the sharp longsword to break into two pieces. The broken sword was thrown into the air and spun like a windmill. Finally, it stabbed into the ground in the distance. Clem, on the other hand, gripped the remaining half of his sword tightly and stared at Noah. Under Clem's gaze, Noah was silent for a moment. Then, he smiled at Clem. "Congratulations, you've successfully broken through." Chapter 1194. Congratulations, you've successfully broken through your limits. When these words came out of Noah's mouth, the aura that was like a tempestuous wave suddenly disappeared as if it had never existed in the first place. On the side, Gajef, Hagrid, Ibilui, Gragland, Tina, and Tia seemed to have only just remembered that they needed to breathe. They hurriedly took in a deep breath. Clem grasped the remaining half of his sword tightly and panted heavily. He looked at the broken long sword in his hand absent-mindedly. After a while, Clem seemed to finally let out a sigh of relief. His body was like a puppet with its strings cut. He slowly knelt on the ground and greedily breathed in fresh air into his lungs. However, even so, Clem still looked at the broken longsword in his hand in a daze. It was as if he couldn't believe the strength he had just used. He looked at Noah timidly, as if he was afraid that he was dreaming. Just now, you've broken through your limits." Noah met Clem's gaze and chuckled. "In words that you can understand, it means that you have comprehended a new martial skill. A new battle technique?" Clem looked at Noah blankly, as if he still couldn't react. "You should be able to feel it, right?" Noah laughed and said to Clem. "Just now, you used strength that exceeded your limits. This is a fact." Hearing Noah's words, Clem looked at the broken longsword in his hand again. Yes. No one knew better than Clem. Just now, Clem had used strength that exceeded his previous limits. Noah said that Clem had comprehended a new battle technique. It was a battle technique that could release the restrictions of the brain, from the body to the senses, and improve the body's functions in all aspects. After that, Clem named this battle technique brain liberation. As long as he used this battle technique, Clem's strength would increase to a whole new level. He would obtain strength that could rival platinum-ranked adventurers. This wasn't a small increase. One had to know that Clem's original strength was only comparable to a gold-ranked adventurer, which was equivalent to around level 10. He was also equivalent to a magician who could cast second-tier spells. On the other hand, platinum adventurers were equivalent to level 15 and above. They were also equivalent to magicians who could cast tier 3 spells. If it was said that Clem was only stronger than the average soldier when he didn't use brain liberation, then Clem was qualified to be called a first-rate soldier when he used this skill. For Clem, this was definitely an extraordinary improvement. After understanding this fact, Clem was somewhat excited and subconsciously stood up. However, just as Clem stood up, a wave of intense pain and fatigue attacked his body, causing him to lose his footing and fall forward. But before that, someone caught Clem. "Don't force yourself to stand up, just sit on the ground and rest." Gujiefu appeared in front of Clem and caught him. He gently put him on the ground and looked straight into Clem's eyes. "It seems that using that skill to break through one's limits for a long time will cause great fatigue and burden on the body. You have to be careful when using it." The skill called brain liberation was originally free from the limitations of the human brain on the body's muscles. The reason why the human brain would create such limitations on the muscles was to prevent unnecessary burdens on the body. Releasing such limitations would naturally cause a burden on the body, and it might even cause the muscles to break. Therefore, it was definitely not a skill that could be used for a long time. Clem seemed to have understood this point. He took a deep breath and calmed down. He forced himself to endure the pain in his body and looked at Noah. He lowered his head deeply. "Thank you very much, Lord Noah." At this point, how could Clem not understand? Just now, the reason why Noah released such a powerful aura was to stimulate Clem's potential. When a person was at their limits, the chances of breaking through their limits would increase by several times. Noah, who understood this principle, after confirming Clem's determination, used this method to stimulate Clem's potential, allowing Clem to comprehend the martial skill called mental liberation. Otherwise, Noah wouldn't have released such a powerful aura to deal with an opponent who couldn't even leave a scratch on his finger. Therefore, Clem's heart was filled with gratitude towards Noah. "Don't thank me. This is the result of your hard work. I only gave you a push." Noah spread his hands and acted as if he didn't do anything. "Moreover, you wanted me to teach you how to fight, but I didn't have that much time to teach you step by step. That's why I chose to use such a method. It's not something to be grateful for. Even so, I am still very grateful," Clem said with a sincere tone. "Without Lord Noah, I might not have been able to improve no matter how hard I work. If there is a chance, I will definitely repay your kindness." "Then you should repay the warrior chief." Noah glanced at Gudjefu and said helplessly. "It's because I'm indebted to Sir Warrior, and because Sir Warrior seems to care about you very much, that's why I gave you a push." This also made me realize that I underestimated Lord Dole. Gudjefu laughed bitterly. "Not only are you a magic chanter whose strength is far above mine, you're also a warrior monk. Your body has been tempered to the point that it can rival steel. I'm sure I wouldn't be able to last more than 10 moves against you." This sentence was heard by Ihagi and the others who were also approaching. "Magic chanter?" Ibilui looked at Noah with great surprise. "You're also a magic chanter?" Tina and Tina also looked at each other before rising to their feet. It wasn't as if they hadn't seen people who practiced both martial arts and magic. However, as the saying goes, mastery is better than erudition. Focusing one's limited energy on martial arts and magic would only make one's martial arts and magic mediocre. To be able to improve one's magic to a level that even Gudjefu couldn't compare to, one had to be at least at the 5th tier of the fine steel tier. To be able to use 5th tier magic while also being as tough as steel as a warrior monk? Good boy, you hid your strength so well. Gagrain looked at Noah and laughed heartily after a while. "Not bad, I'm interested in you. Do you want to sleep with me for a night, boy?" Noah almost fell over. "A one-night stand? Do you have to be so open? You'd better know your place, brainless ant." Annabelle walked over slowly, and stared at Gegland with an icy gaze. "You want to serve Lord Noah like this? Why don't you go back to the furnace and be rebuilt?" Gagrain glowered at them, and he was just about to yell something when Tina and Tia held him back. "Don't you know where you are before speaking? He has a servant who's as beautiful as Princess Lana by his side. How could he be interested in you?" With that said, Tina and Tia dragged the struggling Gagrain away. "That's impossible." Ibiroe muttered to herself as she looked at Noah through the mask. "How could a human be so strong? And he's so young." Only Mihagi looked at Noah with a twinkle in her eyes. Soon, Mihagi seemed to have made a decision. She stepped forward and spoke to Noah. "Mr. Noah, there's something I hope you can help me with." Noah was slightly taken aback by Haggis's sudden words. Ebru and the others were also stunned. Then, as if they had thought of something, they stood up in surprise. "Leader." Elbaru hesitated for a moment and said with uncertainty. "You're not thinking of asking him to help you with that, are you?" Gudjefu also seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Noah with bright eyes. "If we can get Sir Dole's help, then there won't be any accidents." Hearing this, Noah frowned slightly and looked around. When he found that everyone's eyes were fixed on him, he looked at Mihagi. Mihagi nodded and said, "Please go inside and talk." Chapter 1195. Under Ohajisai and Gudjefu's greeting, Noah brought Annabelle and the fine steel-level adventurers of the Blue Rose Guild back into the mansion and came to the hall. Other than Annabelle, who was loyal to Noah, and Clem, who claimed that he did not have the right to sit on the same level as everyone present, the rest of the people sat down. Just as they sat down, Ohajisai went straight to the main topic. "I wonder if Mr. Noah has heard of the organization called Yakushi." "Yakushi?" Noah raised an eyebrow. Until now, most of Noah's information about this world came from the Holy Bible of Sunlight of the Si Lien cult nation. The rest was obtained from Khan village. Therefore, Noah did not know much about some of the powers in the kingdom. However, some of the things that could be said to be well known, Noah only knew about them through hearsay when he was in Elanter. For example, Noah only knew about Princess Lana, who had the title of Gold, from hearsay. And in this part of the information obtained from hearsay, there were also some deeds of the so-called Yakushi organization. It was a powerful criminal organization that was entrenched in the darkness of the kingdom. Perhaps it was not known how powerful this criminal organization was, but from the general structure of this organization, one could more or less judge its power. It was said that the Yakushi organization was just like its name, divided into 8 departments. These 8 departments were respectively involved in the slave trade, assassination, smuggling, theft, drug trade, bodyguard, finance, and gambling, a total of 8 businesses. The departments coexisted with each other, and could be said to be the #1 illegal organization in the kingdom. Of course, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that this criminal organization had secret dealings with many of the kingdom's nobles. They were in cahoots with those dirty nobles, harming the people together. Their influence had already seeped into the political field. Therefore, even if in the eyes of the law, the Yakushi was undoubtedly a scourge, but because many nobles were secretly supporting this criminal organization, the kingdom could not do anything about it. Therefore, if one had to use a word to describe the Yakushi, the most suitable word would undoubtedly be malignant tumor. A malignant tumor that had taken root and sprouted underground in the whole kingdom. Now, since Ohajisai mentioned this malignant tumor, then, the answer to what she wanted Noah to help with was obvious. At that moment, Noah looked at Ohajisai. "You want me to help you get rid of the Yakushi?" Hearing this, Ohajisai's expression became a little bitter. Not only Ohajisai, even Gujiefu looked like he had swallowed some bitter water, as if he could not say anything. "If we can, of course we want to get rid of this criminal organization." Ohajisai sighed. "It's just that the Hachiko's infiltration into the kingdom is really too terrifying. With those aristocrats secretly supporting them, it's really too difficult to completely eradicate them." Speaking here, Ohajisai looked and said. And said. In the Yakushi, the 8 departments, S8 departments. The Yakushi organizations. Hearing this, Noah more or less understood what Haggis was trying to say. "Recently, we have received reliable information." Haggis looked straight at Noah. "It seems that the meeting of the managers of the various departments of the 8-book finger will be held soon." Ibilua, Gegland, and Tina straightened their backs slightly at Haggis' words. Noah, who was keenly aware of this, came to a realization. No wonder the 3 fine steel-level adventurers from the Blue Rose would suddenly appear in a border area like Elanter. It turned out that they had gone there to collect information on the Hachibana. "Do you still remember the outlaws from yesterday, Sir Dole?" Gujiefu asked Noah. "Those are the pawns that Hachibana first sent to the capital to prepare for the meeting. My subordinates discovered their tracks by chance, so I led the troops to chase after them. This proves that the meeting of the various departments of Hachibana will indeed be held in the capital in a few days. This is undoubtedly a good opportunity," Haggis said in a loud voice. "If we can find the location where the Hachibana is holding the meeting and take down those managers, even if we can't destroy the entire Hachibana, we can at least hurt the Hachibana." "Is that so?" Noah looked at Haggis meaningfully. "But isn't the Hachibana secretly colluding with many nobles? Even if we arrest them, it won't be long before they are declared innocent and released with the help of those nobles, right?" Hearing this, Haihei suddenly smiled. "That's only if our goal is to arrest them." There was no one who didn't understand the meaning behind Hagusi's words. Including Annabelle and Clem. "Those guys are just pests that pollute the kingdom." Gujiefu snorted coldly and said. "Eradicating all of them is definitely beneficial to the kingdom." "If that's the case, with everyone here, is there any problem?" Noah looked around at Haggis and the rest. "We have Sir Gujiefu, who is known as the strongest warrior in the kingdom, and the various elite fine steel-level adventurers. Can't we take down the Hachibana? Haggis and the rest instantly looked at each other, then looked at Noah in unison. Mr. Noah, the criminal organization of the Hachibana is not simple at all. Haggis said seriously. In the 8 departments of the Hachibana, the security department in charge of bodyguards has many experts. Among them, there are 6 of the highest level bodyguards known as the 6 Arms. It is said that every member of the 6 Arms is an existence that can compete with the fine steel-level adventurers. Every one of them is very strong. Gujiefu continued Haggis' words. In terms of combat power, although the members of the Tetsangshan are also fine steel-level adventurers, there are only 5 of them. Moreover, the other side not only has the 6 Arms level bodyguards, but also other combat personnel of various sizes. If the members of the Tetsangshan were to face them alone, I'm afraid it would be quite disadvantageous. Noah's heart skipped a beat as he glanced at Ibirui. Ibirui seemed to have felt Noah's gaze and glared at Noah. Gujiefu probably didn't know Ibirui's true strength, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't think that the Tetsangshan couldn't deal with the 6 Arms. With Ibirui's strength of at least level 50, even if she faced all the members of the 6 Arms, she should be able to win. However, the small soldiers of the Hachibana were indeed a problem. Originally, we came here with the intention of asking the chief warrior to help us a little. With the chief warrior's troops, we have more confidence in dealing with the Hachibana. Haggis shook her head. However, although the chief warrior's troops are directly under his command, after all, his job is to protect the king. He can't freely dispatch them for personal purposes. Personal purposes? Noah narrowed his eyes and sneered. So, to annihilate the criminal organization, there is also a personal purpose. You can't openly dispatch the country's troops for assistance. Haggis and Gujiefu were suddenly speechless. However, that was something that couldn't be helped. If they openly dispatched troops to deal with the Hachibana, the nobles who received the news would definitely not let it go. Yesterday, it was because the Hachibana's outlaws were fighting on the streets that gave Gujiefu an excuse to dispatch troops. Otherwise, those nobles who were in cahoots with the Hachibana would definitely not watch Gujiefu attack the Hachibana. Therefore, Haggis and Gujiefu also had their grievances unspeakable. Noah secretly shook his head and asked such a question. Speaking of which, why do the members of the Tetsangshan need to point out the Hachibana? That shouldn't be allowed, right? The establishment of the Adventurers Guild was mainly to protect humans from external threats, which was to deal with all kinds of demi-human monsters, thus protecting the human residents. For this reason, the guild had an unwritten rule, which was to never interfere in the disputes between humans. Otherwise, the 3 countries, the kingdom, the empire, and the theocracy, due to political reasons, would probably cause the Adventurers Guild of each country to be at odds with each other, making it impossible for the adventurers to cross the country and help each other to resist the invasion of monsters. Therefore, the adventurers must abide by this unwritten rule. Now, Haggis and her group were violating the taboo of the adventurers. This matter could be big or small. Chapter 1196. At the end of the day, due to the nature of the Adventurers Guild, they could only provide help to humans in resisting foreign races. Even if the Adventurers Guild could easily solve some of the problems of humans, they would not interfere. Although the Hachibana was undoubtedly harmful to the kingdom and everyone had the right to punish it, it was still a human organization after all. Therefore, due to the nature of the organization, the Adventurers Guild would not interfere with the commission to deal with the Hachibana. In other words, it was impossible for Hagi to deal with the Hachibana because of a commission. To be more precise, it should be said that it was impossible for it to be because of a certain commission that was acknowledged and issued by the Adventurers Guild. In other words, if Hagi wanted to deal with the Hachibana, it was either because of her personal reasons or because she accepted a commission that was not recognized by the Adventurers Guild. No matter which reason it was, the Adventurers Guild would not agree with it. Hagi seemed to have expected Noah to ask such a question. Just as she was about to say something, Clem, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. Lady Aindola will deal with the Hachibana because of Lady Lana's commission. Clem said. The princess has always been thinking of ways to deal with the Hachibana. Previously, she had tried her best to abolish the slavery system. However, the Hachibana was involved in the slave trade in the first place. Now, they are still involved in this trade. Therefore, the princess asked the members of the Blue Rose to help. This was the reason why Clem was here. Lana and I can be considered to be very good friends in private. That is why I cannot ignore her request. Haggis laughed in spite of herself. Moreover, to the kingdom, the Hachibana is also a tumor. If it is possible to get rid of it, I will not refuse. As for the Adventurers Guild, you don't have to worry about it. Ibirua glanced at Noah. Although we've violated the rules by getting involved in the conflict between humans, we're still fine steel adventurers. We can be considered the representative of the entire kingdom's Adventurer Guild. Moreover, the people we're dealing with aren't good people. The guild will still choose to turn a blind eye to our actions. Indeed. In the Adventurers Guild, fine steel adventurers had many privileges. Even the guild could not punish fine steel adventurers, let alone banish them. That being said, reputation and evaluation were also very important to adventurers. If they didn't have a good reputation, they wouldn't be able to accept many commissions. Although Hagi and her team would not be punished for dealing with the Hachibana this time, they had still broken the rules and their evaluation in the guild would still be lowered. Presumably, it would cause some kind of damage, right? However, Hagi still accepted the princess's request without hesitation. The rest of the members didn't seem to have any objections. So, Agagi and her group were really thinking for the kingdom, right? I was born a commoner, and I relied on my strength to get the position of warrior captain. I'm trusted by the king, and I've become a thorn in the eyes of the nobles. They can't wait to find a chance to get rid of me. They're always watching me, and it's no doubt inconvenient for me to take action. Gujiefu looked straight at Noah. Furthermore, the nobles are in cahoots with the Hachibana. My direct subordinates and I are unable to act rashly. That's why, if it's possible, we hope to receive your assistance, Your Excellency Dole. Of course, we won't let you suffer a loss. Hagi smiled mischievously. As the biggest criminal organization in the kingdom, the Hachibana must have taken a lot of benefits in secret. In the process of eliminating the Hachibana, no matter what kind of benefits we get, those benefits will belong to Mr. Noah. What do you think? Hagi's words made Noah laugh uncontrollably. Is this considered as a double cross? Anyway, if it's confiscated, it will be divided among the nobles who are in cahoots with the Hachibana for various reasons, right? Hagi shrugged. If that's the case, why don't we give it all to Mr. Noah? We can let anyone take advantage of it, but not those rotten people. Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he was indeed tempted. As the biggest criminal organization in the kingdom, the Hachibana was definitely the kind that was overflowing with wealth. Although Noah had endless steel to sell to ensure that there would be no shortage of funds, the operation of the big underground tomb in Nasarick was not only inseparable from money, but also the production of various weapons, equipment, and props could not be done without materials. In the Hachibana, there should be a lot of such materials, right? Moreover, many of the equipment, props, and items in this world also had magical uses. There must be a lot hidden in the Hachibana. For these resources, Noah had enough reasons to agree. What's more, Gujiefu let Noah get a huge gain with his own connections. Noah still owed this warrior such a favor. Since dealing with the Hachibana could give him a huge gain, and he could also return Gujiefu's favor, it was worth it to make a move. Annabelle. Noah looked slightly at Annabelle, who had been standing behind him, and asked, "What do you think?" Annabelle was slightly stunned. She didn't seem to expect Noah to ask for her opinion. When she reacted, she immediately said, "Everything will be decided by Master Noah." Well, this answer was within his expectations. At that moment, Noah pondered for a moment and looked at Agagi and Gujiefu. "What do you plan to do?" Hearing this, Agagi and the others suddenly smiled. This matter was settled. When the entire capital once again ushered in noon, in the direction of the city gate, a group of people quietly appeared here. With Agagi as the leader, the group of Wild Rose mercenary members had basically changed their equipment. Both Agagi and Gagrain had put on armor. Unlike Gagrain's heavy armor that was almost like a burly man's, Agagi was equipped with light armor. Only the breastplate, gauntlets, boots, and armor skirt were covered with a red tights. Together with her golden hair that shone in the moonlight, she could be described as heroic and radiant. Meanwhile, Tina and Tia had changed into tight-fitting black suits with black veils covering their faces, leaving only their eyes exposed. They were also equipped with breastplates, gauntlets, and kneecaps, and each of them held a dagger in their hands. Only Ebru was still wearing the same black robe and mask. She hadn't changed at all. Of course, it was not only Ebru who did not change. Noah and Annabelle also did not change their equipment. The group stood in front of the city gate. After confirming their equipment and the number of people, they nodded to each other. Then, let's confirm the battle plan for this time, Agagi said as she stepped forward. She had Tina and Tia spread out a map and pointed to a location on the map. Our target this time is here. This is. Noah looked at the mark on the map and frowned slightly. A village? The place Agagi was pointing to was a village. This is not an ordinary village, Agagi said in a serious tone. We have already investigated. This village is one of the departments in charge of the drug trade. It is used to cultivate drugs. Cultivate drugs? Noah said in surprise. An entire village is cultivating drugs? Yes. Agagi nodded heavily. This is only one of them. When she said this, there was a hint of disgust in her voice. That was disgust towards the nobles. In the kingdom, most of the land was owned by the nobles. The royal family only owned 30% of the land. The rest was privately owned. And this village was located in the territory of one of the nobles. Since the entire village was cultivating drugs, it was obvious that the nobles of this territory had instructed them to do so. One could only imagine how evil the nobles were. Our mission this time is to destroy this village. Agagi calmed herself down and explained the reason. Because we still don't know where the meetings of the various departments of the Hachibana are held. With the support of the nobles, it will be difficult for us to find out. So, as long as we attack this village, we will definitely alert the other party. Alert the other party? Noah was confused. What would happen if they alerted the other party? Wouldn't it alert the other party and make them more vigilant? Chapter 1197. It was unknown if Ohagi saw through the doubts in Noah's heart, but she said this in a fluent manner. Although the Hachibunjii is called an organization on the surface, in reality, as everyone knows, they are made up of 8 departments. Rather than saying that they are an organization, it would be more accurate to say that they are 8 organizations. However, these 8 organizations are cooperating with each other, and they are completely united by their own interests. Ohagi pointed at the village on the map that was used to cultivate drugs. If we destroy one of the departments, which is the stronghold used by the drug trade department to cultivate drugs, then we should be able to obtain information on the other 7 departments. Haihei's words undoubtedly confused the rest of the people. Why was Ohagi so sure that the village had information on the other 7 departments of the Hachibunjii? Logically speaking, as partners in the same organization, this kind of important information that could possibly leak the information of their partners should not be very likely to appear, right? Only Noah, after thinking about how Ohagi had specifically emphasized that the Hachibunjii was only a cooperative organization, his heart skipped a beat. You mean to say that the drug department that is cultivating drugs in this village will deliberately put the information of the other 7 departments there to provide to the enemy? That's right. Ohagi laughed coldly. If it is an enemy that has the ability to destroy the stronghold, then for a department, it will definitely be a very difficult enemy to deal with. Knowing this clearly, when a department is in trouble, this kind of organization that is only tied together by interests will definitely think of how to stay out of it. And in order to not let the other departments stay out of it, and in order to divert the powerful enemy's attention to the other departments, every department of the Hachibungi should have prepared the information of the other departments in advance in the stronghold, right? Ibirui smacked her lips. Although I had already expected that the so-called underworld organizations would not really unite, I didn't expect it to be this ridiculous. George Land, Hina, and T also showed some disgust on their faces. Obviously, this kind of behavior that was equivalent to betraying one's companions, for an adventurer team that could entrust their lives to each other, it was definitely despicable. So, as long as we destroy this village, we can get information on the other 7 departments besides the drug department. Haggis clapped her hands, attracting everyone's attention. In addition, when we investigated this village, we also found out about the drug department. In this way, we have gathered all the information about the 8 departments of the 8 books. As long as they could gather all the information about the headquarters of the Hachibana's 8 departments and destroy them in one fell swoop, they would definitely be able to deal a fatal blow to the Hachibana. When that happened, the managers of the 8 departments that happened to be gathered in the capital would no longer be able to sit still. They would have no choice but to seek help from the nobles in the capital who were in cahoots with them. This way, with Hagi's status as a noble and a fine steel adventurer, together with Good Jefu's spies and Princess Lana's intelligence, they would definitely be able to follow the clues and find out where the managers of the 8 departments of the Hachikatsu are gathered. Destroy all of the Hachibana's main camps and eliminate all of the managers of the 8 departments. Then, the Hachibana will only be left with a few remnants, and the threat it poses to the kingdom will be greatly reduced. Hagi's eyes shone brightly. This is our plan. Hearing this, the gazes of the fine steel adventurers gathered on Noah. Although it was said that it would be easy to destroy the 8 main camps of the Hachibana, then eliminate the managers of the 8 departments, greatly weakening the power of the Hachibana. But how could it be easy to do? Other things aside, the 8 main camps of the Hachibana would definitely be filled with experts. Without a certain amount of military strength, it would be impossible to destroy them. Unfortunately, the kingdom was unable to provide any help in this aspect, so it could only be done by Haggis and her team. With the strength of one of the only 2 fine steel adventurer teams in the kingdom, destroying the main camps of the Hachibana's departments might not be difficult. But the difficult part was that once the main camp of a department was destroyed, they would know that the information about their own department would definitely be prepared by the manager of the destroyed department beforehand. The other departments in the stronghold would definitely respond accordingly, or even change their stronghold directly. Thus, if they wanted to destroy the main camps of the 8 departments of the Hachibana, they could only act at the same time. This way, even if every adventurer of the Blue Rose was the highest level fine steel adventurer and had the ability to destroy a stronghold by themselves, in the situation where there were only 5 members, they could only destroy the main camps of 5 departments at the same time. In addition, there was still the strongest fighter in the Hachibana, 6 Arms, who could be said to be comparable to a fine steel adventurer, so this plan was rather unrealistic. Unless Noah made a move. With Noah's inhuman combat power, and Annabelle, whose strength was still unknown, the chances of winning would be the highest. With Noah and Annabelle, when the time came, the group would be able to destroy the main camps of the 7 departments of the Hachibana in one fell swoop. As for the remaining drug department, because they had already received information, Good Jefu was always keeping an eye on it. Even if the troops directly under him couldn't be dispatched, they would still be able to deal with one stronghold. So, as long as Noah made a move, this plan would have a chance of succeeding. Under everyone's gaze, Noah spread his hands. Then, destroying this village that is cultivating drugs is the first step of the whole plan, right? Yes. Ohajisai nodded, her hand moved up from the map, and pointed to a mountain range. However, if we want to go to that village, we have to pass through this mountain range on the way. There are many magic beast tribes living in the mountain range, so we have to cross over to reach that village. After saying that, Ohajisai let Hina and T put away the map, and looked around at everyone. We don't know when the meeting of the 8 departments of the Hachibana will be held, so we have to hurry up and not let the other party's meeting end and leave the capital. Then, we won't be able to catch those managers. Everyone nodded one after another, indicating that they understood. Then, let's use flight first and rush to the mountain range in one go, then enter the mountain range. Ohajisai looked at Noah and Annabelle. Can Mr. Noah and Miss Annabelle use flight? No problem. Noah nodded. Let's go. After receiving Noah's signal, Ohajisai and Ebra stepped forward at the same time, and took out a scroll of parchment from their arms. It was a scroll. Ohajisai and Ebra shook the scroll in their hands at the same time. With a wave of magic, 2 translucent floating boards appeared behind the 2 girls. That was the first grade spell called Floating Plank. Its effect was just like its grade, it was not very big, and it could only create a translucent floating board. The size and maximum weight of the floating board created by this spell were originally affected by the caster's magic power. However, if this spell was launched with a scroll, then the maximum weight would be 1 square meter, and the weight would be 50 kilograms. The floating board created by this spell would move behind the caster, and it could be as far as 5 meters away. Now, the reason why Ohajisai and Ebru used a scroll to launch this spell was to let Gerland, Hina, and T, who could not use flight, ride on it, and let Ohajisai and Ebru carry it on their journey. The reason why they did not need to carry it was because this spell could block the weight. If they carried it, it would affect their flying speed due to the weight. If they used this spell, then it would not affect their flying speed. The only thing to worry about was whether Gerland, Hina, and T exceeded the limit of 50 kilograms. Fortunately, Hina and T were not that heavy, and the 2 of them could ride on one floating board. Gerland's heavy body was a problem, but she had a magic ring that could reduce the weight, so there was no problem. Thus, not long after, the group flew into the sky at the same time, and disappeared in midair. It had to be said that using the flight spell to hasten their journey was indeed very efficient. In less than an hour, the group arrived at the designated mountain range. Let's land at the edge of the mountain range. In midair, Ohajisai said so. There are many flying magic beasts in the mountain range. If we fly directly, we will definitely be attacked by a large number of flying magic beasts. The group nodded, and followed behind Ohajisai, descending towards the mountain range. Chapter 1198. In a corner of the forest at the edge of the mountain range, Noah and the rest landed on the ground at the same time. Noah raised his head and looked around. When they were in the air, Noah saw that this mountain range was basically a forest. As long as they crossed the forest, they would be able to reach the village on the other side of the mountain range, which was used by the Yakumo drug department to cultivate drugs. In fact, whether it was in the game or in this world, there was the existence of teleportation magic. That was magic that was above the 5th grade. Depending on the grade, the distance that teleportation magic could teleport and the number of people that it could carry would also be different. However, there was a type of magic called teleportation gate that could directly open a door between 2 locations, regardless of the distance between them. After passing through the door, then, no matter if it was a living or non-living thing, they would be able to instantly reach the location on the other side of the door. Noah did not know how to use this kind of magic. However, in Noah's treasure trove, there were many tools that could use the effect of portal. Moreover, even if he did not use those tools, Noah could use the guild weapon, Ains Ur Gong staff, that he obtained from the underground tomb in Nasarick. If he used the portal, it would only take a moment to reach the village. However, teleportation magic would always be accompanied by many uncertainties. Just like the underground tomb in Nasarick, wouldn't it be able to hinder the activation of teleportation magic? There were many tribes of magical beasts living in this mountain range, and perhaps there would also be ways to hinder and delay the activation of teleportation magic. Therefore, if they were to recklessly activate the teleportation magic and cause the group to be teleported to places like the underground, then they would be done for. This was also the reason why Ohajisai did not suggest using teleportation magic. After all, Ibirui could use the 5th grade teleportation magic. Moreover, if they were to fly, they would also be attacked by flying magical beasts, so for the sake of safety, they still thought that they should use the method of walking to cross the mountain range. In the forest, with Noah as the leader, Everyone was observing their surroundings and fell into silence. This was because everyone present could feel the murderous aura and heavy atmosphere in the air, which proved that there were magical beasts everywhere in the mountain range. "We need to be careful to avoid a fight," Ohagi lowered her voice and said to everyone. "Once we attract an entire tribe of magical beasts, even we will be at a disadvantage in battle." "It's not as simple as that, is it?" Ibilua suddenly interjected. "If we cause too much of a commotion and attract several magical beast tribes, then even we can only flee. We'll have to see what kind of monster it is," Giglan said casually as he carried his weapon. "If they're goblins and ogres, it doesn't matter how many of them there are. On the other hand, if a few of the more powerful undying come, we'll be in big trouble," Tina said. "When I was collecting information, I heard that in this mountain range, there are indeed some powerful undead. Even the demon tribes are not willing to provoke them." "But don't we still have Mr. Noah and Iberia?" T retorted. "With those two around, even if there are powerful undead, it shouldn't be a problem, right?" Everyone's words made Noah mutter in his heart. That might not be the case. If there were undead like Shadia in this mountain range, then a few of them could really cause trouble for Noah. However, Shadia was a true ancestor of vampires at level 100. With the power level of this world, even if there were such existences, it was impossible for there to be so many of them. Moreover, this mountain range was not very far from human settlements. Many people had crossed this place before. If there really were undead of that level, then this place would have become a complete forbidden zone. No one would want to come here. In short, it's better to be careful, Noah reminded. "I can feel the aura of many magical beasts mixed in the air. There should be many magical beasts living nearby. Regardless of their level, if we get entangled with them, it will definitely take some time. If it takes until night time, then it will be troublesome." Everyone immediately looked at each other and nodded their heads. If they were to fight at night, it would indeed be quite disadvantageous for humans. This was because many magical beasts had night vision and would not be affected by darkness. Humans did not have this ability. Although there were magic tools that could give people night vision, it was best to avoid fighting at night if they could avoid it. Moreover, it was not just night vision. Many magical beasts had powers that humans did not have. Undead would not tire, but humans needed to rest at night. Once they fought at night, it would definitely be very bad for humans. Immediately, after everyone confirmed the tools they could use, they raised their vigilance and walked into the forest. Noah walked at the back of the group of fine steel adventurers. No, the one walking at the back should be Annabelle. At this time, the combat maid was observing the surroundings while approaching Noah to ask for instructions from Noah. "Lord Noah, since we're going to fight the tribes of monsters and humans, why don't we ask Nassarik to send an army over?" "No need." Noah shook his head. "The creatures in Nassarik are all mutants. It is not suitable for them to move in groups in front of humans. Moreover, with our strength, it will not be difficult to solve this incident. There is no need to mobilize a large force. You just need to be ready to go all out at any time." "Yes." Annabelle bowed her head and accepted the order. Then she continued to guard Noah's back, vigilant of the surroundings. Although Annabelle was only level 63, she was an 8th order magic caster. As long as Annabelle went all out, she would definitely be a legendary existence for humans who could not even use 7th order magic. In order not to cause unnecessary trouble, Noah let Annabelle only use 5th order magic on the surface. However, if they really encountered trouble, they would be fools to hold back. So, the group began to move cautiously in the dense forest, but they moved unswervingly in the direction of the village. The forest was eerily silent. There was not even the sound of birds, beasts, or insects. Under such circumstances, in order to avoid fatigue caused by high concentration, Noah and the others divided into groups to guard the surroundings. However, the more they walked, the more Noah felt that something was wrong. It's a little strange, although Noah's muttering was soft, at this moment, even the sound of a needle falling to the ground could be heard clearly. No one could not hear his voice. Mr. Noah, do you think so too? Annabelle slowly came to Noah's side. She did not care about the difference between a man and a woman. She directly stuck close to Noah and let her voice be as soft as possible. In any case, it's really strange for it to be so quiet. Even if there are no birds, beasts, or insects, it's fine. There are many magical beast tribes living in this mountain range. It's impossible for there to be no movement. Noah did not care about the fragrance from Annabelle's body and said to himself. Moreover, the atmosphere in the air is getting more and more oppressive. It feels like something incredible is about to appear in front of us. Annabelle was silent. The forest where there were no signs of magical beasts was silent. That silence made one's hair stand on end. The forest was filled with a dangerous aura, not knowing what would happen at any time. The road started to become uneven again. Sometimes, there would even be 3 or 4 forks in the road. It was like an intricate maze. Annabelle, Ibirui, and the others did not want to miss a suspicious place. They spread out a security net in all directions. With the help of the map, they chose the path to their destination and went deeper into the forest. However, the more they went, the more the oppressive atmosphere and uneasiness spread in the hearts of the group. Finally, at a certain moment, Noah suddenly raised his head and looked forward. "It's here." This sentence did not elicit any reaction from anyone. It should be said that it did not have time to elicit any reaction from anyone. In the next second, in front of them, a slight tremor came very suddenly. Everyone's eyes narrowed. A large group of black shadows appeared without any warning and rushed over amidst the slight tremor of the ground. Chapter 1199. Rumble. As the tremors on the ground became more frequent and violent, the main body of a large group of black shadows that surged out from the forest in front was also exposed in front of everyone. It was a herd of horses. They were a group of 8-legged horses that were larger than ordinary horses. That's... Noah's eyes flashed. 8-legged horses? 8-legged horses. They were a type of demonic creature. They looked like horses, but had 8 legs. They were known for their outstanding muscle strength, endurance, and mobility, and were generally regarded as the most outstanding land demonic creatures. These demonic creatures were not unfamiliar to humans. Regardless of whether it was in kingdoms, empires, or theocracies, there were people who specialized in capturing and taming these demonic creatures for daily use. Of course, no matter how much they resembled horses, these 8-legged horses were still demonic creatures. Not only did they possess a certain degree of strength, but they were also extremely ferocious. It was extremely difficult to capture or tame them. Because of this, the market price of 8-legged horses was shockingly high. They were more expensive than 5 well-trained war horses. Even ordinary nobles couldn't easily own one. Now, the herd of 8-legged horses that numbered in the hundreds were like galloping wild beasts. They raised their heads and neighed at the sky with ferocious glints in their eyes. They charged forward in a frenzy amidst the powerful stomps of the ground. If such a herd of demonic creatures charged over, no matter how strong a person was, they would most likely lose their life to their powerful legs. Thus, without any hesitation, Hagrid gave the order. Go! Ebirua, Gorgland, Tina, and Tia raised their heads at the same time. They moved at the same time as if they had agreed beforehand. Roar, boo, 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 boo. The burly Geegland let out a furious roar. He raised the weapon in his hand and charged towards the horde of 8-legged horses in front of him. The weapon in Gorgland's hand was a warhammer with spikes protruding from the side like an axe. It was a first-tier weapon that could even shatter steel with a single strike. It wasn't just the weapon. Almost all of Gorgland's equipment could be considered top-tier magic tools. Geegland was like a war chariot as he fearlessly charged into the horde of 8-legged horses with his top-tier equipment and powerful physique. Just as Gorgland was about to come into contact with the horde of 8-legged horses, he smashed the warhammer in his hand heavily onto the ground. Bang! The moment the muffled sound rang out, a shocking shockwave burst out from the ground, smashing the ground into pieces. The shockwave that exploded surged toward the horde of eight-legged horses like a tide, sending the incredibly strong demonic creatures flying and instantly disrupting the horde's momentum. Chi! Almost at the same time, two black shadows tore through the air and shot out explosively from the sides of Gerland, who hadn't retracted his spiked warhammer from the ground. Like ghosts, they swept past the eight-legged horses that were sent flying. Poochie! The sound of their bodies being pierced reverberated through the air. It was the sound of the eight-legged horses' bodies being sliced apart by the sharp daggers in the instant that the two shadows flashed past them. In the next second, the eight-legged horses that were sliced apart by the sharp daggers fell to the ground one after another. The eight-legged horses that fell to the ground either turned a strange green all over, or their wounds didn't shed a single drop of blood. It was as if they had been sucked dry and shriveled up. The eight-legged horses that had turned a strange green all died from poison. The poison dagger that they had bought from Noah was fully utilized by Tina and Tia. In addition to the poison dagger, Tina and Tia also had their own famed weapon, the vampiric dagger. As the name implied, it was a special weapon that could absorb all blood in an instant. The eight-legged horses that didn't shed any blood and shriveled up were easily killed by this weapon. When Gorgland raised his warhammer again, Tina and Tia, who had turned into ghostly shadows, had already charged back and forth through the horde of eight-legged horses, killing dozens of eight-legged horses along the way. As for Ibirua, this young girl used fly when Gorgland, Tina, and Tia charged out. She floated in the air and waved her hand. Rich magic fluctuations immediately reverberated around her petite body. In the next moment, a series of crystal-like knight spears suddenly appeared around Ibirua. Like arrows, they shot out explosively and fell into the horde of eight-legged horses. Poochie 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 poochie. The powerful eight-legged horses were easily pierced through from top to bottom by the crystal spears. They fell to the ground amidst mournful cries. Seeing the crystal spears that appeared around Ibirua, Noah was slightly surprised. That's the fourth-rank spell, Crystal Knight Spear. Ibirua smiled sweetly at Noah. Ibirua is an elemental mage, and her spell is limited to the most powerful type of earth element crystal. Hearing this, Noah looked at Ibirua with interest. As mentioned before, there were all kinds of professions in this world. Elemental mages were one of the professions of magic chanters. Elemental mages were specialized magic chanters that focused on strengthening a specific attribute. When these mages used spells that focused on strengthening a specific attribute, their attack power would increase by several times. But on the other hand, once their area of expertise was sealed, they would become very weak. For example, an elemental mage that focused on strengthening fire element magic would be several times stronger than a normal mage when using fire element magic. But if they were restrained by water element magic, their combat power would decrease several times. However, it was undeniable that elemental mages were the strongest among their peers when using spells that focused on strengthening an attribute. Ibirua was an elemental mage that focused on strengthening earth element magic. However, Ibirua didn't only focus on strengthening earth element magic, she also limited it to crystal element magic, increasing its power to the maximum. Earth element magic was related to strong acid, poison, gravity, and so on. Among these domains, there were also some specialized types that were more powerful than ordinary earth magic such as acid, poison, and gravity. Gemstones were one of the specialized earth element spells. And not only did Ibirua choose the specialized gemstone area, she also limited it to crystal element magic, achieving the true meaning of strengthening. Originally, elemental mages had the highest power among their peers when using spells that focused on strengthening an attribute. While becoming an elemental mage, Ibirui also chose the gem specialization, which was more powerful than most spells in the earth magic. Under such circumstances, Ibiru was still not satisfied. She restricted the crystal type of the gem specialization and strengthened the earth magic of the crystal type to the limit. Triple enhancement. One could only imagine how frightening Ibirui's earth magic was when she used crystal gem enhanced earth magic. Noah even noticed that Annabelle couldn't help but glance at Ibirua. That was because Annabelle was also an elemental mage that focused on strengthening lightning element magic. That was why no one knew better than Annabelle just how much power Ibirua's extreme enhancement would bring out. Ibirua's level wasn't as high as Annabelle's. However, Annabelle had no choice but to pay attention to Ibirua, who had enhanced her magic to such an extent. Noah estimated that if Annabelle and Ibirua were to fight, Annabelle would still win. However, if Annabelle didn't use her most powerful 8th grade magic, it wouldn't be that easy to defeat Ibirua. Ibirua kept throwing her crystal knight spear, piercing through the bodies of 8-legged horses one after another. Tina and Tia also shuttled through the horde like a gust of wind, using their poison dagger and vampiric blade to instantly kill magical creatures. Gagrain also violently swung the heavy hammer in his hand, smashing away the 8-legged horses that were much stronger than him. Noah smiled faintly. As expected of a team of elite steel adventurers. Both their strength and cooperation are impeccable. Being praised by such an unfathomable person like Noah made Ibirua puff up her chest and reveal a happy expression. After all, that was Ibirua's team, wasn't it? Chapter 1200. Bam! When the last 8-legged horse fell to the ground with a muffled thud, the entire space returned to silence. In the dense forest, the 8-legged horses were lying on the ground in different states of death. Some were pierced through by crystal-like knight spears. Some had their chests crushed by violent spikes and hammers. Some of them were stained green by the extremely poisonous dagger. Some of them had their blood sucked dry by the bloody blades. There were so many different ways to die that it made one's hair stand on end. Among the horde of horse-like corpses, Ibirua, Geegland, Tina, and T stood in different positions and surveyed their surroundings. Even after dealing with hundreds of powerful magical creatures, the 4 fine steel adventurers didn't show the slightest sign of fatigue. That wasn't because the 4 of them were wearing magical tools that didn't allow them to get tired. Instead, it was because they were all fine steel adventurers. They were far from having to use their full strength to fight until they were out of breath. In particular, some of them were wearing magic tools that could restore physical strength and heal injuries. This level of danger was nothing compared to the true danger. Not only that, but the 4 of them were also in the mood to chat. Hundreds of 8-legged horses, they all died just like that? It's a pity. If we didn't have another mission this time, we would have captured all of these 8-legged horses and sold them. Even if they weren't tamed, some arrogant nobles would have eagerly bought them, right? That's one less chance to make a fortune. Ibirua, Geegland, Tina, and T chatted leisurely. Ibirua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Only Noah was slowly pacing between the 8-legged horse corpses. His brows were tightly furrowed, and the more he walked, the tighter his frown became. Ibirua and Ibirua keenly sensed that something was wrong with Noah and turned to Noah. What's wrong? Ibirua asked directly. Is there something wrong? Something wrong? Noah stopped and shrugged. Or should I say, there's something wrong from the start. Noah's words made Ibirua and the others a little confused. What did he mean by that? Seeing this, Noah voiced his opinion. I think the process of you guys dealing with these 8-legged horses was a little too smooth. This sentence made Ibirua and the others even more confused. What's so strange about it being so smooth? Gegland's manly and resolute face furrowed his brows into a knot. It's just a bunch of 8-legged horses. You don't think we had a hard time dealing with them, do you? Although the 8-legged horse was a demonic creature, it wasn't a big deal to those with true strength. After all, in human society, there were people who captured and tamed 8-legged horses and sold them as commodities. Many influential nobles even treated 8-legged horses as a symbol of status. They would use 8-legged horses to pull carriages when they went out to show their nobility. Since they were reduced to a commodity, it was enough to prove that 8-legged horses were not powerful magical creatures. After a rough estimation, the 8-legged horse was equivalent to a silver or gold adventurer, equivalent to a second-grade magic caster, and the same level as Clem, around level 10. In front of a level 29 fine steel adventurer, unless there were tens of thousands of such monsters, they would not pose much of a threat. If that was the case, what was so strange about it being a little smoother? It wouldn't be strange if it was just a little smoother, but the problem is that it wasn't just a little smoother. It was too much, Noah said with a frown. Didn't you guys notice that when you were dealing with the eight-legged horses, these magical creatures didn't resist at all? They were just charging forward. Noah's words were like waking up a person from a dream, causing everyone present to be shocked. This time, even Haihagi's brows furrowed. Indeed, I didn't see any resistance from the eight-legged horses. They were just charging forward. This is too abnormal, right? Noah interrupted Abirua and exposed what he was thinking. It didn't look like they were charging at all. It looked more like they were running for their lives. Running for their lives? Abirua, Gorgland, Tina, and Tia looked at each other. Running for their lives? The eight-legged horses were running for their lives? Why? Actually, Noah didn't say one thing. That was, the entire forest was too quiet. Logically speaking, since there were quite a few magical creature tribes here, it shouldn't be so eerily quiet. Unless something unusual had happened. Thinking of this, Noah turned his head and looked in the direction where the eight-legged horses had come from. If he wanted to know the answer to this, he would have to go and take a look. And so, Noah didn't hesitate and walked in the direction the eight-legged horses came from. Without any hesitation, Annabelle immediately followed behind Noah and moved forward together. Haggis and the others glanced at each other, then followed after him. In the end, they didn't walk for long. About 20 minutes later, Noah was the first to stop. He looked ahead with a hint of astonishment on his face. It wasn't just Noah. Even the group of fine steel adventurers who had followed them widened their eyes. This was because what appeared before them was an extremely abnormal scene. To be more precise, it was an open space that had been ravaged beyond recognition. The dense trees that were originally everywhere seemed to have been crushed by something, breaking apart and creating an empty space. The ground also seemed to have been crushed into powder and gravel, as if there was a huge monster that had gone on a rampage. What was even more horrifying was that there were traces of a strange liquid everywhere in such an open space. Some of the trees that had turned dark purple also had the same strange liquid on them. It made the trees seem as if they were burning, emitting black smoke and a pungent stench. What's going on? It stinks. Both Tina and T covered their noses with their arms. Abirua and Gagrain's faces were tense. Because Abirua was wearing a mask, no changes in her expression could be seen. However, one could still feel that her gaze was full of astonishment as she looked at the ravaged open space in front of her. Noah, on the other hand, noticed something else. Walking forward, Noah came to the front of a wreckage. It was as if it had been corroded or swallowed. Only less than half of its body was left. This is... Haggis followed behind Noah. She looked at the wreckage, and her eyes flickered. The corpse of an eight-legged horse? The rest of the people also looked down at the wreckage and stood there in a daze. It can't be. Abirua said in a low voice. Apart from us, there are other fine steel adventurers who came here, right? A fine steel adventurer team. No one guessed that it was Mithril. No one guessed that it was Orichalcum. Instead, they guessed that it was the highest grade, fine steel. This proved that Abirua believed that the wreckage in front of them was not something that could be done by fine steel adventurers. In response, Abirua slowly shook her head. Apart from us, there is only one other fine steel adventurer team in the kingdom, and I did not receive any news of them coming here. So, Gagrain said in a low voice. What's going on here? It's obvious that something came here and hunted the eight-legged horse. Noah glanced at the wreckage on the ground. Moreover, it's not an adventurer. Silence descended upon them. I have a bad feeling about this, Ibilua said, as if she wanted to express her thoughts on behalf of everyone else. Let's leave this place quickly. No one objected to Abirua's words. Except for Noah. Leave? Noah chuckled and shook his head. He looked up and stared ahead as he uttered these words. How about we ask that big guy over there if he agrees? Chapter 12:01. For a moment, almost no one reacted to Noah's words. Of course, there was no need for them to react. Because, in the next moment, everyone trembled all over, as if they were covered by sticky air. Their necks stiffened, and they raised their heads to look forward. Roar, it was a sound that sounded like the growl of a huge beast. When such a sound rang out, but it echoed very clearly in the entire space, everyone present saw it. In front of them, in the depths of the forest, a huge shadow suddenly emerged, dragging a long tail behind it. As the ground trembled slightly, its body stretched out. Because it was still daytime, everyone's vision was not greatly limited. Therefore, almost at the instant that the huge black shadow appeared, many people were able to see the full appearance of that figure. It was precisely because of this that except for Noah and Annabelle, the rest of the people's bodies stiffened. It couldn't be helped. The monster that appeared in front of everyone was a little too shocking. What slowly emerged from the depths of the forest was a monster from head to toe. Its appearance was like a lizard, but also like a python. Its body was nearly 10 meters long, and it was holding an 8-legged horse with only one leg exposed to the outside in its mouth. Such a huge monster stretched out its huge head from the depths of the forest while casting its gaze on Noah's group. With the Hagis in the lead, Abirua, Gegland, Tina, Tia, and even Annabelle felt as if their bodies were frozen at this moment. Their bodies began to stiffen. Retreat! Noah shouted without hesitation. Don't be stared at by its eyes. Noah's reminder finally made everyone present react. Retreat! Ihagis shouted. Don't look at its eyes. After that, everyone turned their heads and rushed out without any hesitation in another direction, disappearing from the huge monster's sight. Roar! At the same time, the huge monster's pair of eyes burst out with a ferocious glint. It let out a loud roar and rushed toward Noah's group. Clap, 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 clap. In an instant, wherever the huge monster passed, the trees were smashed into pieces. Taking a closer look, the trees and ground that were hit by the huge monster were corroded by the viscous liquid that dripped down from the monster's body, emitting black smoke and a foul stench. Sensing the menacing behemoth behind him and the huge commotion, Gegland was the first to shout. It's a huge basilisk. What kind of joke is this? Huge basilisk. Anyone who had a little knowledge of monsters would know the name of the huge basilisk. The reason was simple. That was a monster through and through. Its gaze had the effect of petrification. Its body fluid was a level of poison that could instantly kill people. Its scales and skin was comparable to the metal known as mithril. It was an extremely terrifying type among monsters, a huge monster that was above the level of fine steel adventurers. Especially for close-range combatants, its body fluid was highly toxic. Its scales and skin were incomparably hard. Even its gaze could petrify people. It was the natural enemy of natural enemies. It might be difficult to understand the strength of the huge basilisk, but it was much more obvious if it could be differentiated by level. The huge basilisk was at least a level 20 monster when it was young. When it reached adulthood, it would definitely be above level 40. The strongest huge basilisk could even reach level 60. For humans, it was definitely a terrifying monster. And the huge basilisk chasing behind them was more than 10 meters in size. It didn't look like a young basilisk at all. In other words, it was a monster that was at least level 40. For fine steel adventurers above level 29 and below level 35, it was already a very dangerous existence. Even Annabelle and Elburu, who were both above level 50, had a troubled look on their faces. Because even if their level was above the huge basilisk, if they didn't have the means to deal with the petrification gaze and the highly toxic body fluid, they would also be forced into a dead end by the huge basilisk. Noah, who was rushing with everyone, was at the very back. He looked behind him without the slightest fear. He looked at the huge basilisk that was rolling over like a tank, constantly roaring at the sky, smashing huge trees and crushing heavy rocks along the way. Then he looked at Hagrid. You have measures to deal with the petrification and poison, right? Yes. Hagrid said without hesitation. But we need time to prepare. Is that so? Noah looked back and looked at the huge basilisk covered in disgusting body fluid. He frowned and was speechless. Stop in 3 seconds. Hagrid immediately understood. She didn't answer, but her whole body reverberated with magical waves, and even her eyes closed. In the next moment, Noah suddenly stopped, turned around, and raised a hand in the direction of the huge basilisk. Hum. A precise geometric pattern suddenly fluctuated in front of Noah's raised hand. It suddenly rotated, bursting out a dazzling light. Immediately, a resplendent light beam shot out from the intricate geometric pattern. It cut through space and landed on the body of the charging giant snake monster amidst the vibrations in the air. Bang! The beam of light that fell on the huge basilisk directly exploded, turning into a terrifying impact. It was like a white firework that suddenly bloomed in front of the huge basilisk. The huge basilisk was sent flying and smashed into the ground not far away, causing the ground to shake. Almost at the same time, Haggis and the others stopped in their tracks. Hagrid, who was at the back, had her eyes closed from beginning to end. The magical waves reverberating from her whole body became more and more intense. Finally, as Hagrid stretched out her hand, all of the magical waves condensed in her hand, causing a burst of soft light to surge in front of her palm. Magic abnormal state resistance strongest holy. In front of Hagrid's palm, a burst of soft light suddenly enveloped everyone present, causing the silhouettes of everyone present to flash with a pure white halo. At this very moment, the magic called Holy that Hagrid had launched was a 4th-rank magic that could grant others resistance to abnormal states. Whether it was petrification or poison, they were all abnormal states. Therefore, using this type of magic, especially one that was as high as the 4th grade, would basically be able to resist most abnormal statuses. Moreover, before launching Holy, Hagrid had also strengthened the ability to resist abnormal states of the Holy magic to the maximum. In this way, even if the huge basilisk's petrification ability and poison doubled, it wouldn't be a threat. Watch me. Gagarin raised his spiked warhammer, and after a violent roar, shot out like a bullet, scuttling to the front of the huge basilisk that was heavily smashed on the ground. The spiked warhammer in his hand was like a windmill, swinging towards the huge basilisk's body. Clang! Along with a bell-like sound, Gagarin's spiked warhammer smashed a scale on the huge basilisk's body, but wasn't able to cause the slightest bit of damage to the huge basilisk. The huge basilisk immediately roared, its huge tail whipping out like a long whip, ferociously landing on Gagarin's body, who couldn't dodge in time. If this blow had landed solidly on Gagarin's body, even if he was equipped with the highest quality magic armor, he would still be unavoidably injured. However, before that, an inconceivable voice that sounded like a young girl, yet also like an old man, coldly shouted. Crystal barrier. A mirror-like barrier made entirely of crystal abruptly appeared amidst the spatial ripples, protecting Gorgelon within. Bang! The huge tail of the huge basilisk ferociously struck the crystal barrier, and under the huge force, the barrier was directly smashed apart. However, the terrifying blow of the huge basilisk was indeed blocked. Taking advantage of this time, Gagarin hurriedly withdrew his spiked warhammer, and withdrew. Roar! The huge basilisk let out an angry roar. Chapter 1202. AOO. An extremely loud and clear roar reverberated throughout the entire forest, causing the atmosphere and the entire space to be stirred up by the sound waves. Whistling sounds of wind breaking rang out one after another. The gigantic basilisk's tail carried terrifying power as it swept through the air like lightning, fiercely sweeping towards the retreating Gagarin. Don't look down on me. Seeing that the gigantic basilisk was actually chasing after him, Gagarin let out a furious roar. While maintaining his retreating momentum, he grabbed the spiked warhammer in his hand and swung it out like a windmill, fiercely colliding with the gigantic basilisk's tail. Bang! The collision between the warhammer and the basilisk's tail stirred up a shockwave. A gust of wind rushed over, numbing Gerland's arm as he held the warhammer. His entire body was sent flying backwards, smashing into the ground. He rolled a few times before stabilizing his body. He then leaped up and knelt on the ground with one knee, panting rapidly. As for the gigantic basilisk's tail, it paused for a moment in the collision. Some of the scales on it seemed to have cracked, but it wasn't damaged. The hardness of the gigantic basilisk scales and skin was comparable to that of mithril. In this world, on the surface, only orichalcum and steel could be harder than the scales and skin of the gigantic basilisk. If one didn't have the power to shatter mithril, then one wouldn't be able to harm the gigantic basilisk at all. In addition, the gigantic basilisk's body would occasionally secrete highly toxic bodily fluids that could instantly kill. Its gaze also had the effect of petrification. It was truly the natural enemy of close combat. As expected, if I were to fight alone, I wouldn't be able to do anything to a monster like the gigantic basilisk. Gagrain roughly spat out a mouthful of saliva, but didn't forget to thank Ibilui. Thanks, Ibilui. You've been a great help just now. If it wasn't for Ibiliui's crystal bulwark that helped Gagrain block the basilisk's attack, he would have been injured long ago. Of course, Gagrain's gauntlets were a magical tool that could recover the injuries and stamina of the target it touched. Even if Gagrain was injured, it would heal him. However, this kind of recovery couldn't be completed in an instant. Therefore, Eberru's crystal bulwark was a great help to Gagrain. But, if even you can't hurt that giant basilisk, then it's going to be very difficult for us to hurt it. Tina and T, who focus on one-hit kills but don't have high attack power, are even less of a match for them. Erbiel looked at Haggis. Leader, what should we do? All of a sudden, the elite steel adventurers of the Blue Rose Guild, including Ibilua, Gragland, Tina, and T, all turned their gazes to Hagrid, asking for instructions. Gagrain's attacks could only barely damage the scales of the giant basilisk. Tina and T didn't have very high attack power, so they could only provide support. Hagrid was a magic caster of the faith system. She was more like a priestess or a priest. Although she wasn't bad in direct combat, she was definitely not as good as Garland in terms of pure attack power. In other words, if they wanted to defeat the giant basilisk, in the Blue Rose Guild, only elemental sorcerer Ibilua, who focused on strengthening the attributes of crystal-type gemstones, could fight the giant basilisk. Judging from the current situation, the elite steel adventurers of the Blue Rose Guild would win in the end. However, not only would that take a lot of time, but it would also be accompanied by unpredictable dangers. Therefore, considering that they had other motives, fighting the giant basilisk was definitely not advisable. However, even if they knew that there was no benefit in this battle, what else could they do? Roar. The giant basilisk let out an earth-shattering roar. Its voice was full of violence, and its huge pair of blood-red eyes were like two huge red lanterns. With extreme violence and malice, it glared at Haggis and the others. Looking at the huge monster in front of them and feeling the terrifying malice on its body, Haggis didn't think that this giant basilisk would obediently let them go. With the strength and speed of the giant basilisk, unless Haggis and the others directly used Fly or Legend to leave this mountain range, it would be extremely difficult to escape from the mouth of the giant basilisk. At that moment, Haggis could only cast a pleading look at Noah. Noticing Haggis' pleading look, Noah couldn't help but smile bitterly. As expected, we still have to make a move against that disgusting monster? It was unknown whether or not it understood Noah's words, but the giant basilisk's violence and malice in its eyes increased exponentially. Roar. In the next second, an extremely ferocious roar rang out from the mouth of the giant basilisk. Immediately afterward, the giant basilisk suddenly bounced out like a spring. Against the whistling atmosphere, it rushed in the direction of Noah. Annabelle, who had been standing behind Noah, had a cold look in her eyes. Just as she was about to rush in front of Noah to protect him, Noah seemed to have guessed that Annabelle would do this and spoke softly. You don't have to make a move. Annabelle almost reflexively stopped what she was doing. Noah, who didn't turn his head, looked at the giant basilisk's head that was gradually expanding in his field of vision, and his eyes were like an ancient well without ripples. So, the giant basilisk opened its stinky mouth in Noah's direction and shrouded Noah's body. Presumably, the giant basilisk wanted to swallow Noah whole, right? Be careful. Haggis and the others exclaimed one after another. However, Noah didn't seem to hear anything. He quietly watched the giant basilisk biting toward him, and an imperceptible light flashed in his dark and deep eyes. Just when the giant basilisk's bloody mouth was about to fall on Noah's body, golden ripples suddenly fluctuated out of the space like water waves, covering the entire space around the giant basilisk. Amidst the numerous water-like golden ripples, silver chains with wedges of different shapes and flowing with bright golden light slowly extended out. With a rise and fall, they shot out explosively. Immediately, the sound of chains colliding reverberated in the surroundings. Silver chains with resplendent golden light coiled back and forth around the huge basilisk, unceasingly streaking across the space. Finally, the huge basilisk was completely surrounded. Soon after, the chain tightened and bound the giant snake monster's body. Clang! The sound of steel colliding with steel resounded. That was the sound of the golden ripples explosively shooting out, binding the giant basilisk, and tearing the giant basilisk towards Noah's direction. Under everyone's gaze, the giant basilisk's incomparably scarlet mouth stopped less than 2 meters away from Noah, and couldn't move forward anymore. Roar! The giant basilisk let out a crazy roar, and used all its strength to struggle, causing the chains coiling around its body to emit intense clashing sounds. Unfortunately, no matter how the giant basilisk struggled, it couldn't break free from the shackles of the chains. After all, the heavenly lock, Enkidu, was a god-defying noble artifact. Although it was unable to exert the terrifying binding power that even gods could not break free from when used on a target without divinity, it was still a noble artifact. Even Akinalia, whose strength was comparable to the 5 great dragon kings, had to spend some time to break free from the heavenly lock, let alone this giant basilisk. Thus, amidst the frantically struggling giant basilisk's roar, Noah took a small step back, leaving that bloody mouth filled with the stench of blood. His brows were tightly knitted the entire time. Although I'm not afraid of poison, I really don't want to come into contact with the disgusting body fluids of this snake. The mouths of the fine steel adventurers, led by Iguana, Elua, Gragland, Tina, and Tia, twitched slightly. If they were to face the giant basilisk, then the fine steel adventurers, Wild Rose Song, would have to fight with their lives on the line. How could they care about the disgusting body fluids? In contrast, Noah easily subdued the giant basilisk, and even captured it alive. He actually had the leisure to worry about coming into contact with its body fluids? Was the difference between them so obvious? Chapter 1203. Under the binding of the heavenly lock, Enkidu, the gigantic snake monster was like an ordinary snake that had its weak spot pinched. Even if it struggled with all its might and roared at the sky, causing the ground and atmosphere to tremble, it was still unable to move an inch. Seeing how the powerful and ferocious monster was unable to do anything to the silver chains that flowed with golden light, the group of fine steel adventurers led by Agagi were all curious. What kind of chains are those? Ibilua asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Even a magical creature like the giant snake monster can't do anything to it. That chain is definitely comparable to those famous magical tools in the legends, right? Hearing this, Noah just shrugged and said this perfunctorily. No matter what grade of magical tool it is, as long as it works, it's a good magical tool. The group of fine steel adventurers rolled their eyes in unison. That was as good as not saying anything. So, what do we do now? Gagrain raised his spiked warhammer and asked eagerly. This big thing can't resist anymore. If we kill it here, it'll be a great achievement. After hearing Gagrain's words, the other fine steel adventurers were more or less moved. The main purpose of adventurers was to protect the safety of humans from all kinds of monsters. Therefore, the Adventurers Guild would make a corresponding reward system based on this. When dealing with monsters, even if they didn't accept a commission, the adventurers could still bring a part of the monster's body to the Adventurers Guild after the deed was done and receive a corresponding reward. And the amount of reward depended on the strength of the monster that was hunted. A demonic creature like the giant basilisk was a huge threat to an entire team of fine steel adventurers. If they hunted it, not only would they obtain a considerable amount of rewards, but their reputation would also increase by leaps and bounds. Of course, as the highest level of fine steel adventurers, Agagi and the others didn't care about the rewards and reputation. Eliminating the huge threat that was the basilisk was the most important thing. For most adventurers, exterminating monsters was just a job for them to make ends meet, but for ordinary residents, it could reduce their chances of encountering danger. There were all kinds of monsters in this mountain range, and it was certain that it would attract many adventurers. There might even be people like Noah and the others who needed to cross the mountain range to reach the other side. If the ordinary adventurers and humans encountered a monster like the basilisk that had the power to wipe out an entire group of fine steel adventurers, they would definitely die. If they couldn't deal with the basilisk, then for the sake of survival, Agagi and the others could only choose to escape and leave it behind. But now, the basilisk was immobilized because of Noah's noble artifact, and was nothing more than a target. As a result, Agagi and the others had their hearts had their minds. In response, Noah's might. No, let's just leave it here. Noah's and the others, and were. Seeing the puzzled look on Agagi's and the others' faces, Noah explained. There's no doubt that the reason why the forest is so strangely quiet after we entered this mountain range is definitely because of this basilisk. The nearby monster tribes have probably been eaten clean by this basilisk, right? As mentioned earlier, this mountain range wasn't a restricted area. The only truly powerful monsters here were the powerful undyings that Tina and T had mentioned. They might pose a threat to low-level adventurers, but they weren't much of a threat to high-level adventurers. As long as there was someone comparable to a mithril, even if they couldn't run rampant in this mountain range, they definitely wouldn't lose their lives for no reason. Under such circumstances, the monsters that lived here were naturally not difficult to deal with. However, a huge basilisk had appeared here. This gigantic basilisk could even threaten an entire team of fine steel adventurers. In this mountain range, it was undoubtedly the most terrifying king. If we let this giant basilisk continue to stay here, the magical creatures won't dare to come close. Even if they do, they will be gnawed by this giant basilisk until not even their bones are left, said Noah. So, if we let it continue to stay here, not only will it effectively eliminate the other monsters, but it will also ensure that the monsters won't come close. Whether it's for us who need to hurry and don't have the time to fight with the monsters or for others who need to pass through here, it's a good thing. Ibilui, Glenn, Tina, and Tia all came to a sudden realization. If that was the case, it wasn't wrong. Agagi was the only one who objected. Although this will reduce the threat of the other monsters, the basilisk itself is still a threat, isn't it? Only then did everyone come to their senses. Leader is right. Ibilui looked at Noah. Although it's a good thing to reduce the threat of the other monsters, the basilisk itself is a huge threat. It's even more of a threat than the normal monsters. If we let it stay here, it'll definitely be a threat to us. This isn't a problem either. Noah recalled the information he knew about the basilisk. Giant basilisk is a magical creature with a strong sense of territory. That's why this giant basilisk hunted down all the magical creatures around it. But at the same time, such a magical creature wouldn't leave its territory so easily. As long as we report to the Adventurers Guild, the people there should be able to use intelligence magic to find out the area where the giant basilisk is active. Then, if we prohibit others from entering this area, there shouldn't be a problem. After hearing Noah's explanation, everyone was relieved. If that's the case, then it won't be a problem. Agagi seemed to think that this was more feasible and nodded. Then, about the basilisk, we'll report to the Adventurers Guild when we get back. Then, are we going to retreat now? Ibilui pointed at the chains on the basilisk that was still struggling and roaring. Don't you want the chains? Yeah. Geegland quickly followed. Since you don't want to kill this big guy, then you can't untie the chains, right? Once it's untied, this big guy will go crazy again, won't it? If that's the case, you don't have to worry about it. Noah couldn't help but laugh. Let's just go. As for the chains, after we leave this place and run to a safe distance, it will naturally return to us. After all, Noah's Gate of Babylon had an automatic recovery function. After Noah left this place, he could remove the shackles of the Enkidu. The Gate of Babylon would retrieve the Enkidu. Therefore, there was no need to worry about this problem. Just like that, Noah and his party continued to walk into the depths of the forest amidst the berserk roars of the basilisk. Just as Noah predicted, due to the presence of the basilisk, most of the nearby magical creatures had either died or fled. There weren't many left. If not for the basilisk, Noah and his party would have had to deal with at least 4 or 5 waves of magical creatures. But because of the basilisk, Noah and his party only managed to deal with a wave of goblins and ogres that even the lowest level bronze and iron adventurers could deal with. The rest of the journey was much smoother. Only after they had walked a certain distance did the appearance of magical creatures become normal. This proved that Noah and his party had walked out of the basilisk's territory. And now, they weren't far from their destination. Under such circumstances, Noah and his party welcomed the arrival of darkness. Geegland, who was walking at the forefront and acting as the vanguard, glanced at the darkening sky, turned his head, and shouted to Noah and Hagrid. "It's dark, shouldn't we stop?" Hagrid looked at Noah and waited for Noah to nod in agreement before speaking. "Then, let's set up camp nearby." Everyone nodded in agreement. Chapter 1204. As adventurers, they often had to spend long nights in the wilderness. Therefore, even though the fine steel adventurers of Blue Rose were all women, they did not reject the idea of camping in the wild. Instead, they were very familiar with the idea of camping in the wild. Under Hagrid's orderly instructions, the entire group of fine steel adventurers of Tsangxiang Rose began their preparations. Tina and Tia set up the tents that they had prepared beforehand. As for Gagrain, he placed 4 totems that looked like magic arrays at 4 points around the campsite. After Gragland inserted the 4 thick totems in 4 different directions around the campsite, he connected the 4 totems with a thin rope. After that, he tied a bell in the middle of the rope between 2 totems. Most people who saw this would think that the bunch of fine steel adventurers were using the ropes and bells as a warning net. If a magical creature came here and touched the ropes, it would make the bells ring, allowing the adventurers to deal with the enemy in time. In fact, this bell warning net was indeed a defensive measure that adventurers often used when camping in the wilderness. However, the adventurers here weren't ordinary adventurers. They were the highest-ranked fine steel adventurers. Thus, this seemingly crude method of setting up a bell warning net was, in fact, heaven and earth apart from the bell warning net used by ordinary adventurers. First of all, the totems that were stuck at the 4 points of the campsite weren't ordinary wooden stakes. They were a type of magic tool. This type of magic tool was like a radar. It contained the power of information magic. Once it was stuck in the ground, it would begin to release magic, enveloping everything within a radius of 100 meters. The 4 bells tied to the ropes were also a type of magic tool. They had the effect of sounding alarms. Once the 4 totems detected a threat within the effective range of the magic, the 4 bells would ring due to the effect of the alarm. This kind of method was much more advanced than the ordinary bell warning net. After all, a normal bell warning net would only be effective when a magical creature came into contact with the ropes. For monsters and even humans who were more intelligent and would not casually fall into such traps, it was useless. In addition, by the time the monster touched the rope, it was equivalent to proving that the monster was not far away. There would be all kinds of problems in terms of time. If the attacking monster was a long-range type or had the ability to fly, then the so-called bell warning net would not be of any use. Now, the 4 totems and 4 bells had completely solved this problem. Although the price of the 4 totems and the 4 bells was rather high, as a fine steel tier adventurer, this amount of money was a piece of cake. Apart from that, Ibirui also used isolation, illusory, and remove spells in succession. Isolation could block the sound from the outside of the camp, so that no matter how big the commotion inside the camp, it would not spread to the outside, eliminating the possibility of attracting monsters that were more sensitive to sound. Illusory was a type of illusion that could camouflage the inside of the camp into the same scenery as the surrounding environment, eliminating the possibility of attracting monsters with night vision. Remove was used to isolate the aura of life, eliminating the possibility of attracting the undead who were extremely sensitive to the aura of life. Although the 3 types of magic spells were the lowest ranked magic spells, they were still quite useful in this situation. At the very least, with these measures, everyone in the camp could have a good night's sleep in peace. Noah, who was in charge of preparing the bonfire, saw the whole process of Ibirui's arrangement after lighting the bonfire. After knowing the wonderful use of these spells, Noah could not help but feel emotional. Although it is only a first-ranked spell, but a low-ranked spell does not mean that it is useless, right? Of course, isn't it? Ibirui said as she continued with her arrangement. Magic is knowledge. If you want to learn magic, you must first grasp the knowledge. Only by increasing your knowledge can you understand how to use magic and how to use it. Even if you are facing enemies who can use magic, you can still make the right judgment and carry out a more accurate response. That is true. Noah said casually. However, there are so many types of magic in this world. It's not realistic to learn all the knowledge of all these types of magic. Therefore, according to the different ranks, the amount of magic knowledge you must have is also different. Ibirui seemed to have opened up a new topic and even responded to Noah's casual words. For example, ordinary people do not have the opportunity to come into contact with high-ranked spells. Therefore, generally speaking, as long as you have the knowledge of the third-ranked spells, you will not be illiterate in this world. The third rank? The casual expression on Noah's face slowly dissipated. After pondering for a while, he suddenly said such a sentence. By the way, in this world, most people know what the highest rank of magic is, right? Taking advantage of this opportunity, Noah asked a question that had been bothering him for a long time. But, it's obvious that no one knows that level of magic, so how did you determine that the highest level of magic is that? Noah's words attracted the attention of everyone present. Ever since he had more or less obtained information about this world, Noah discovered that this world had many similarities with the game Yggdrasil. For example, professions and magic were the basics. Professions were already mentioned, so there was no need to talk about them here. But when it came to magic, it had to be mentioned. In this world, there were a total of 10 ranks of magic. Among these 10 ranks of magic, ordinary people could only use the second rank. Those who could use the third rank were called geniuses. The fifth rank was a high-level spell that only people who had stepped into the realm of heroes could use. The sixth grade of magic was the limit of magic that humans could use. It was said that a long time ago, there was someone among the 13 heroes who defeated the demon god who threatened the world who could use the seventh rank of magic. Unfortunately, that had always been a legend, and it had not been confirmed. As a result, magic above the seventh rank became a mythical realm that humans could not touch. In Yggdrasil, magic was divided into 11 ranks. Noah discovered that the top 10 ranks of magic in this world were exactly the same as the top 10 ranks of magic in Yggdrasil. The same here not only meant that the people in this world could use the magic in Yggdrasil, but also that the strength of the corresponding rank of magic was the same. Even if there were some newly developed magic in this world, the rank of the magic would be divided into the same rank in Yggdrasil. The only difference was that in Yggdrasil, in addition to the 10 ranks of magic corresponding to the 10 ranks of magic in this world, there was also the existence of the 11th rank of magic. This kind of magic that surpassed the 10th rank of magic was collectively known as super rank magic. However, super rank magic was not so much magic as it was a skill. It did not consume magic power when activated. There was a limit to the number of times it could be used in a day. At the stage when it was just learned, it could only be used once a day. After level 70, every 10 levels could increase the number of times it could be used. In other words, even if he wanted to teach it, he might not be able to teach it to others. Noah did not know if it was because of this that the highest rank of magic in this world was the 10th rank of magic. However, it was this saying that the highest rank of magic was the 10th rank that Noah really did not understand. If no one can even use the 7th rank of magic, then how did they determine that the highest rank of magic is the 10th rank? Noah asked. After all, in this world, no one can use such a high rank of magic, right? Such a question made everyone stop what they were doing and look at each other. Chapter 12:05. The entire camp fell into an indescribable silence. However, Noah could feel that it wasn't because he mentioned something that shouldn't be mentioned that led to this situation. It was because the rest of them had the same confusion. At the very least, Glenn, Tina, and Tia all had confusion written all over their faces. It was quite clear that Glenn, Tina, and Tia also didn't know the answer to this question. Annabelle, who had been standing behind Noah, also raised her head slightly. Obviously, Annabelle was also slightly interested in this topic. It could be said that Annabelle didn't know anything about the situation of this world. Because the information obtained from the people of the Sunshine Scripture was only shared with Noah and the Guardians, and it had not been conveyed to the rest of the people in the big underground tomb of Nazareth. Therefore, Annabelle, who was not clear about the situation of this world, had just been following Noah's instructions during this period of time. Perhaps, Annabelle didn't seem to care much about the situation of this world and felt that it didn't matter. For Annabelle, no matter what happened in this world, it had nothing to do with her. As long as Noah was fine, it had nothing to do with Annabelle. That was Annabelle's idea. Now, the reason why she was interested in this topic was only because Annabelle knew that in the big underground tomb of Nazareth, level 10 magic was not that rare. Not to mention others, Yael Abed, Zaisha, Yon, Mer, Kositz, Demiurgos, and other guardians could all use level 10 magic. For max level 100 characters, the use of tier 10 spells was quite frequent in battles. Therefore, Annabelle, who could only use level 8 magic, was more or less interested in that level of magic. Under such circumstances, Ibirua quietly completed the rest of her arrangements. Then, she came to the bonfire and sat down across from Noah. Raising her head, Ibirua cast her gaze on Noah through the gap of the mask. Do you know the 8 Desires King? 8 Desires King. Noah was startled at first, then his heart moved. 8 Desires King. Noah had indeed heard of this term before. Of course, the method was still hearsay. This was because the so-called 8 Desires King only appeared in myths and legends in this world. Moreover, it was a myth that anyone with a little bit of knowledge would know. The so-called 8 Desires King was actually an unknown existence. It was said that about 500 years ago, there were a few existences with great divine power that suddenly appeared in this world. They had once dominated this world with absolute power for a short period of time. Some people said that the 8 Desires King was as tall as 9 heavens. Some people said that the 8 Desires Kings were the most powerful race in this world. They were the kings of the dragon race and were called Dragon Kings. There were many different opinions, and no one could confirm what kind of existence the 8 Desires King was. However, in that era, the 8 Desires King, who had great divine power, destroyed all the countries in this world. He relied on his unparalleled power to dominate the entire world. However, the 8 Desires King was still not satisfied. After dominating the world, he became even more ambitious and pointed his spear at each other. In the end, the 8 Desires Kings who fought for each other's things all died together. This myth was actually very unpopular. This was because no one was willing to admit that this world was once dominated by some inexplicable existences whose origins were unknown. In the end, they even had to rely on their mutual destruction to regain this world. However, whether it was really just a myth or a legend was still a question. Of course, many people thought that this was an exaggerated story. However, among some people with status and power, many people thought that the 8 Desires King actually existed in reality. The reason was very simple. Rumor had it that there was a city in the distant southern desert. That was the capital built by the Eight Desires king when he dominated the continent. That capital still existed to this day. Moreover, from time to time, there would be rumors that some people obtained some treasures that the Eight Desires king once owned from there and brought them out to dominate for a time. It was said that in the past, the Eight Desires king not only had the power to destroy the world, but also countless treasures. Under such circumstances, Ebirua began to explain. Among these treasures, there was a magic book called the Nameless Spellbook. A magic book? Noah asked curiously. Could it be that the so-called 10th level magic was learned from that magic book? That's right. Ebirua nodded. In the book left behind by the legendary Eight Desires king, it contains unimaginable magical items. It said that it records all the magical items in the world. Even the newly invented magical items in this world will be recorded in the book. Even the newly invented magic would be automatically recorded? Noah raised an eyebrow. Is that the function of that magic book? Who knows? Ebirua curled her lips. In any case, it's because of the records in the Nameless Spellbook that people know that level 10 magic exists. There's such a thing? At some point in time, Gegland came over and sat beside Ebirua. He looked at her and directly said this sentence. Why didn't I know about it? There are many things you don't know. Ebirua glanced at Gragland. After all, although the highest level magic is the 10th level, and this is widely spread because of the existence of the Nameless Spellbook, people only know that the highest level magic is the 10th level. In other words, people only know that the 10th level magic exists, but they don't know that it was obtained from the Nameless Spellbook, right? Noah smiled indifferently. Then, does that book really exist? Who knows? Ebirua said the same thing as before. It's just that it's said that people have seen the book with their own eyes, and those who have seen it all said that the book is protected by an extremely powerful magic. Apart from the rightful owner, no one else is allowed to touch it. That's only natural, isn't it? Haihigi walked over and sat beside Noah as she spoke. It's a divine item that records all the magic in the world, and even the 10th level magic, the highest level magic in the world. Its value is incomparable to anything in this world, so how can it be casually flipped through? That's why people have to know their own limits. Ebirua concluded with this sentence. It's best if you don't end up like the Eight Desires king because of that item. Otherwise, even if you have the greatest power, you'll only end up as a laughingstock. Ebirua, Gragland, Tina, and Tia all nodded. Only Noah said thoughtfully. If it's a magic item that can automatically record newly developed magic, then is it possible that this magic item can only record up to the 10th level magic, and can't record magic above the 10th level? That's not impossible. Ebirua chuckled. However, even spells of the 7th order and above are considered to be in the realm of legends. The limit of a human is the 6th order of magic. Only the legendary 13 heroes can learn spells of the 7th order, not to mention the highest 10th order. If that's the case, who would think that there would be spells of a higher rank than the 10th rank? Hagrid smiled faintly. Even if there is, no one at the 10th level can use it. Even if magic of a higher level exists, it's just a figurehead to people. Noah responded with a smile, but he was more or less thinking about it. Perhaps there were records of magic beyond the 10th level. But those who saw it didn't mention it, so that wasn't necessarily the case. Chapter 1206. By the time he noticed it, the village with a strange atmosphere was already in front of Noah's eyes. It was a village that occupied a fairly large area. However, Noah was still somewhat hesitant about whether or not he should call it a village. The reason for this was that the village was surrounded by high walls, making it impossible to see what was going on inside. The only thing that could be seen was the watchtowers that were taller than the walls of the village. The structure was rather sturdy. It was rare to see such a sturdy watchtower even in the cities of some kingdoms. Rather than calling it a village, it would be more appropriate to call it a strategic stronghold. It gave off a heavily guarded feeling. Of course, the village was relatively close to the mountains where all kinds of monsters lived. The villagers were worried about being attacked by monsters, so it was not strange for them to build tall walls and watchtowers. The problem was that for a relatively poor village, the extravagant protection of a protective wall should only be built around the buildings or warehouses, and the farmland should be placed outside the wall. After all, if the farmland was surrounded by the village, building a wall that surrounded the farmland and residences would be rather taxing and costly. It was not something that a normal village could afford. However, there was not a single acre of farmland outside the walls of the village. Judging from the size of the wall, the farmland was really surrounded by the village. In addition, the people on the watchtowers in the village could see arrows nocked on their bowstrings slowly moving in all directions as if they were patrolling. It was as if they were in an overly cautious state, ready to shoot at any moment. Such a scene was telling others. This village was definitely not as simple as it looked. Noah stepped out of the forest in the mountain range and gazed at the heavily guarded village. After a while, he turned his head and looked at Haggis. "That's the target?" "That's right." Hagrid narrowed her eyes. "Have you encircled the entire field?" "Of course they did, right?" Gerland said in disdain. "The farmland is used to cultivate drugs. How can they be placed outside for people to admire? That's why we need to sneak in and burn the village," Ebirua said. "But before that, we need to prepare some things." Haihigi nodded before turning to Tina and T. "Tina, T, I'll leave it to you." "Understood." Tina and T responded at the same time. Then, their bodies flashed and turned into blurry shadows, rushing towards the village. In just a while, even Noah could not see Tina and T. Noah and the others set off before dawn. So, even though they arrived at their destination, there was still about an hour or so before dawn. The reason why they set off before dawn and arrived at their destination was mainly to make it easier for Tina and T to sneak into the village. After all, it was impossible for the stronghold that was used to cultivate the raw materials of drugs to not have a special liaison. Those liaisons, no matter how bad they were, should at least be able to use the message magic. In order to prevent these liaisons from using message to transmit information when the village was attacked, causing the people in the village to be prepared and even retreat or call for help, Noah and the others first needed to get rid of the liaisons. This kind of work was undoubtedly Tina and T's specialty. Once Tina and T got rid of the liaisons, they would set the village on fire. At that time, Noah and the others could directly rely on their invincible strength to directly rush into the village and wreak havoc. "Do you need me to go with you?" Noah asked casually. "I also have a way to sneak in without being discovered." Although he was discovered by Gray and Vaz in the world of Elven Sword Dance, that did not mean that Noah's invisibility helmet could be seen through by anyone. The reason why Gray and Vaz could discover Noah was because they had been assassinated for most of their lives and developed terrifying intuition. Noah didn't think that there would be such an existence similar to Gravath in a stronghold used by one of the departments of a criminal organization to cultivate drug raw materials. Therefore, as long as Noah used Hades's invisibility helmet to sneak into the village, it would definitely be more efficient than Tina and T. Unfortunately, Marcy shook her head. "Just leave it to Tina and T. They are assassins and ninjas. No one is more suitable for this kind of work than them." As it turned out, Haggis Trust was absolutely right. Almost not long after, in front of them, in the village that was built with high walls, a burst of fire suddenly appeared, causing the people on the lookout tower to panic. Seeing this, Haggis' eyes lit up and smiled. "The operation has begun. Everyone, it's our turn." "Okay." Geegland was the first to shout. "I've long wanted to smash this dirty place into smithereens." After saying that, Geegland directly rushed out. Noah, Haggis, and Ibirui looked at each other and then smiled at the same time. Then, Haggis' eyes flashed with a hint of coldness. "Let's go." The light that represented the activation of magic flickered on the group of people. In the next moment, Noah, Annabelle, Haggis, and Ibirui directly used the flight magic to fly into the village that was surrounded by flames. Immediately after, the four of them split up and flew in different directions. Fire. Put out the fire. Why is it suddenly on fire? Water. Where's the water? Bring the water over. When Noah flew over the burning field alone, the whole village was already in a mess. Every one of them had a weapon in their hands. Their appearance was rough, and they were definitely not the good kind. At a glance, it was obvious that they were used to tyrannical abuse. They were simply outlaws of the underworld, shouting and yelling at the surroundings with a ferocious look on their faces. Fire? Noah could not help but sneer. Then let me add fuel to the fire. After saying that, Noah spread out his hand, and around his body, a beautiful magic circle suddenly appeared, covering the entire space. On the beautiful magic circle, bursts of magic light began to gather, causing the dazzling light to explode in midair, finally attracting the attention of the people below. All of a sudden, the eyes of all the outlaws with weapons in their hands widened, and they roared out in shock. No! It's not a fire. It's an enemy attack. You finally understand? A trace of coldness appeared in Noah's eyes. Unfortunately, it's too late. In the next moment, the beautiful magic circles that covered Noah's body burst out with flashes of light. Beams of magic light burst out from the beautiful magic circles, like a meteor shower falling from the sky, shrouding the area below. Boom! 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 Accompanied by a series of explosions, a fierce fire burst out in a corner of the village, like a mushroom cloud, rising into the air. Boom! 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 At the same time, in the village, frequent explosions began to occur in other corners, setting off the same intense fire. Sometimes, it was a sky full of lightning that fell to the ground. Sometimes, it was a scorching fireball that exploded on the ground. Sometimes, it was a bright crystal that exploded from the ground. Attacks like these landed on the ground one after another, destroying buildings one after another, stirring up intense flames and shockwaves. Noah, Annabelle, Ohajisai, and Ibilua began to move from the four corners of the village, wildly unleashing magic from mid-air, causing beams of light, lightning, fireballs, and crystals to explode in the village one after another, turning the village into a sea of fire at an astonishing speed. Run! There's a magic chanter attacking the village. Where's the liaison? Ask for help quickly. In the village, the outlaws belonging to the Yakuza's drug department were like ants on a hot pan, jumping and jumping anxiously, crying for their parents as they ran back and forth. Only a few people, under the roar of some fierce burly men who seemed to have a high status, began to set up bows and arrows, shooting at Noah, Annabelle, Ohajisai, and Ibilua in midair. Under such circumstances, the village was gradually covered in a sea of fire. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.